best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews.
Yes, hello. Good evening. This is Nick, creator of Hayes Reviews. We're back for another live stream, live reading tonight, concluding Vernon Coleman's excellent book, Endgame, The Hidden Agenda 21. It's written in the year 2021, in the first year. Would that be the first year? No, the second year, I suppose, of the big C event, the lockdowns, the intimidation of the global population by governments, pretty much all of them, everywhere. And as Mark Passio liked to remind us at the beginning of his episodes of his podcast, What on Earth is Happening, government is slavery. I often ruminate on that phrase. He opens his podcast with such a strong phrase that most people will just ignore you or laugh in your face or guffaw, turn the other way. They won't hear it. They will not hear that idea that government is slavery. But when you reflect on it and think about it and slice it, if you're embroiled in a system and you have no recourse to change it, really, apart from putting a tick in a box every 4 years, and you have to pay into it no matter what, and you are forced to use and you are punished if you don't follow the rules of the system. You can't opt out of it. It's very increasingly harder to leave and emigrate to other places. There's paperwork, there's bureaucracy, there's forms to fill out, there's fines, there's bills to pay, and you don't really have much control over any of it, and you can't opt out of it. I think slavery is a pretty good word for that. I don't know about you. It's certainly not overt slavery, but maybe covert slavery or soft slavery, or the kind that isn't the image. You know, we've probably, many of us have seen the film 12 Years a Slave, right? And it's a brutal film, and there's a guy chained to a post getting whipped. It's not that kind of slavery, but it's like soft slavery. It's sort of the kind of slavery you can get on board with, the kind of slavery that people will enjoy and defend and stick up for and argue is the best slavery that's ever been created on the face of the planet, right? Throughout history. But it's slavery, whichever way you slice it, I think. You've just got to apply a bit of logic and be consistent in your definitions and ask a few questions. And the main one is, you know, if 100% of your labor is taken away from you, would you say that's slavery? And most people are like, yeah, that's slavery. If you work all day and you don't get to keep any of the product of your labor, and you have to keep working and all the product of your labor is taken off you, that's slavery. All right, cool. So that's 100% taken off you. So at what percent is it not slavery? 90%? 50%? 40%? 20? 10? 5? 0? It's 0, right? If you are forcibly having a product of your labor taken away from you, any percentage of it, and there's nothing you can do about that. There's no way to get it back. There's no way to complain if that money gets sent over to a foreign nation to fund some sort of murderous war effort, or if that money is used to be handed out to people who just arrived here on small boats. You don't really have any say in what happens once that slice of your productive labor is taken away from you. Then we got to call it what it is, don't we? I think. But anyway, That's a very cheerful topic to start off tonight's live stream. It's boiling today in England. It's the summer's come back. It cooled off for a few days. It dropped about 10 degrees Celsius, and now it's cranked back up. And we're very sleepy here. We're very hot and sweaty and a bit tired, but very excited to be with you tonight, continuing this series. So hello to Frank and Tammy over on YouTube. Lovely to see you both. We're going to be concluding the book. It's been a good read. Very different to the other books on the channel. It's had a different kind of pace, a different tone. I think this book serves a different function than some of the others. We have books such as Bertrand Russell, which was there to shape public opinion and to influence the masses because he was a popular philosopher of his time. He was touted as an anti-war guy, and of course people were incredibly fatigued by the First and Second World War by this point, and so Bertie Russell gets rolled out to be the voice of reason, to be the head of the anti-war movement. And we read his book Has Man a Future, in which he drummed up some fear about nuclear war and what it would mean if people allowed that to happen, and of course advocating for a top-down global system of scientific control to prevent that from ever happening. And that's the theme that pops up time and time again. Then we also read the story of the Rockefeller Foundation, Raymond B. Fosdick, who was the president of the Rockefeller Foundation. That book was more of a in their own words type of account. I don't think it was written to influence public opinion. I don't think it's a very widely available book. And certainly Raymond B. Fosdick wasn't a household name. Not to my mind. Maybe over in America he is. I know his brother, Harry Fosdick, is more well known for being involved with Alcoholics Anonymous, and also quite an influential guy. I think he was a Baptist or some sort of pastor, some sort of Christian denomination. So the Fosdicks might be more well known across the pond. But the purpose of that book, to my mind, was really just to see how they describe themselves, because we know these foundations are very powerful, very influential, and they don't get a lot of scrutiny. And most people aren't really aware of them. And if they are aware of them, it's like, well, they're charitable and philanthropic, so they couldn't possibly be up to no good, could they? And so we had a look at what they said and about themselves in their own words, and that book was pretty interesting. It did have a few key admissions, in particular their involvement with sending a lot of funding and money to China and building relationships with China and rolling out the allopathic medical system there. Of course, Chinese medicine is a whole different system of health, healing, and wellness and well-being. And thanks to the Rockefeller Foundation making investments and bringing people over to America and training them up and sending them home, they got a foothold in that area and were then able to advance the allopathic medical system of treating symptoms with pharmaceutical products, which are largely made from waste products from other industries that people don't have any use for. So we process them and package them into little pills and then sell them to people and tell them that it makes them healthier. And then we just hope and pray that the placebo effect works for at least 50% of the people who take that medication. And in a lot of cases it does. People believe they're getting better, therefore they get better. They believe the medicine worked, therefore they start to feel better and their health improves. But of course, the placebo effect is not something that is taught. We are not given the tools and the skills to harness that, because that would put the pharmaceutical business out of action, and it would put the medical system out of action, and the training that goes along with it. All the money that is taken in by way of university degrees and courses, all that would be really just snuffed out if people realize, oh, I can just heal myself? Right, okay, interesting. So the Raymond B. Fosdick book, that had a different purpose again. It wasn't really for public consumption in my mind. It was more like, this is the official history, and of course there will have been things left out or overlooked or sidelined, and then people in the future who go to find out the history of this organization, they'll just read this squeaky clean, curated version that Raymond Fosdick put together for us. But that was another one we read on the channel. Then we read, I'm just picking a few examples sort of out of thin air now. The Open Conspiracy by H.G. Wells. That is a revelation of the plan. This is what's going to happen. This is the way it's going to happen. And just putting it out there, telling you that it's an open plan. It's not hidden. It's not clandestine. They are meeting in private and having sort of off-the-record chats, Chatham House rules, for example, or Bilderberg, for example. But their plans, their goals, their view on the world gets published in books, and white papers especially, and the minutes of meetings and conferences and all the videos that get uploaded. The plans are out there. And we were having a conversation in the Hayes Reviews Telegram chat about how it can feel very disheartening and pointless to try and point people towards the evidence that is out there. You can be met with total lethargy, apathy, who cares kind of attitude. People are not interested, and they'll still at the same time dismiss you with the conspiracy theorist label. Even when you're saying, I'm not theorizing, I'm bringing at you the evidence, you're the one who's unwilling to look at it. Therefore, it's on you, not me. You're the one who's theorizing, because if you're not willing to look at evidence, then all you have left is theory, you know? So it's kind of ironic in that sense. But it can be disheartening. It can be, you can feel like your efforts are wasted and your time and precious time and energy is not really having a effect. But I think I don't know so much about the metaphysical nature of reality and how it all works on the spiritual side of things, but I have a feeling that every act of truth spoken is important, is meaningful, it matters, and I think it all adds up. And whether or not we can see the effects or the results or the benefit of it in our immediate environment or in our lifetime even, I think it's still worth doing it. So aligning with truth and speaking the truth and trying to do your best to also get your thoughts and your emotions and your actions aligned as well as your words. If you can align all those things with truth, that'll take you a lifetime to figure out how to do that. But you'll be on the right path regardless of whether or not anybody around you listens or takes notice or changes their opinion or mind or way of doing things, right? Because it's very hard to change other people. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can lead a man to knowledge, but you can't make him think, or woman, or child. But I think the effort is important, and I think the act of speaking truth is also important, even if no one's around to hear it. So reading these kinds of books, putting these broadcasts out there for whoever to find and pick up and listen to and benefit from, to me, is really important. And I thank you all for being here and taking part. If you're watching on the replay, don't forget that there is a pinned comment below with timestamps. You can use that to navigate. But we've been through quite a few different books, and Vernon Coleman's book, Endgame, that we're wrapping up tonight, is unlike any of the other books that we've read on the channel. It's not straight history. It's not narrative. It's not account of things that have happened. It's more a snapshot in time. It's more like a window to look back into what it was like during lockdowns, during the unfolding of the Big C event, where we didn't know what was going to happen, where it was going to go, how far they were going to push it. And we had this man, tired, who'd worked for so long in the medical profession, in the journalism profession, publishing columns, newspaper column, being an agony aunt, publishing novels, books for many, many years, having his books published all over the world, in Chinese, in fact. He tells us about how his books were published in China at one point, but then throughout the scamdemic, the publication rights in China got pulled. And then 2 years into the lockdowns, he writes and publishes this book, Endgame, and it is just like a snapshot in time. It's like a survey of what it was like, what we were going through, to those of us who questioned it, to those of us who started to apply a bit of logic and began to realize that the official narrative didn't make any sense. The things we were being told to do didn't make any sense, but it was being rolled out globally, and that means it must have been coordinated and planned for a long time. Systems had to be put into place, mechanisms, hierarchies of authority, communication lines and channels and delegations, and all this bureaucracy had to be put into place for it to be rolled out so successfully globally in the way that it was. And Vernon Coleman wrote this book. He saw what was going on. He did some research. He tied a lot of strings together. And he really made a resource that is accessible, that is easy to read. It's not a slog. It's cut into very manageable, digestible chunks of writing. Some of them are literally a sentence long. Others are 5, 6, 7 pages long, and everything in between, on all sorts of topics. And he writes with a wit and a humor and a satiric tone that I think is very welcome for those of us who are trying to make sense of things, those of us who are trying to point out what we've learned, what we've realized, what we have come to be aware of. It's great to have a little bit of levity and something to make us laugh and giggle and cheer and help boost our spirit and keep our cheer up when we're fighting these battles. And it is a battle, right? It's a spiritual battle. Sometimes it's a battle with our loved ones, with our partners, our friends, our family, our colleagues. We're trying to help them. We're trying to show that we care for them by doing this research and this reading and this learning and sharing that information with them from a place of love and concern and care, friendship and compassion and empathy and decency. You know, it comes from a good place, but it is often not received that way. It's often received with frustration, with overwhelm, with a dismissive wave of the hand. You crazy conspiracy theory, the government would never do that. And often it just boils down to a lack of knowledge of history, people who are not very well versed in the way the world actually works, because they might just be more immersed in trivia, in entertainment, in films, in fantasy, in sports ball, computer games. There's no end to the number of ways that we can be distracted and taken off the path of truth. So for those of you tuning in, I just see we got Asmelia as well in the chat. Good to see you pop in here. For those of you tuning in and embarking upon this journey with me and Vernon Coleman and all the other authors that we've read on the channel, you know, hats off to you. I salute you. It's great that you're out there showing an interest, taking the time to learn these things. And even if you aren't able to influence the people in your life and the people around you, you know, just remember that you weren't always awake. You weren't always hip and wise to all these agendas and these happenings and these people and these machinations and these schemes. And if me, you know, if a moron like me can wake up and start paying attention, I don't like using the phrase wake up. Start paying attention is good though. You know, if a moron like me can suddenly start paying attention and start getting to grips with some of the true history, some of the real motivations and the key players in these agendas, if I can do it, then anybody can, really. There's nothing special about me. I just have a slightly obsessive compulsion to collect things, and it happens to get latched onto books. You know, so that's all. But we can all be slightly over obsessed and compulsive about buying books. You know, I don't think the world would suffer from more people who get into buying books. But this one has definitely been a change of pace for the channel, I think. And I'm looking forward to finishing it up. I don't think we'll be here for the full 3 hours tonight. We've got a few sections to polish off, and then there's a final section that's a little bit longer. It's got a bit more explanation in that final section. Part 3, it's called Rescuing Our Future from the Past. Oh, it's not even a... Yeah, in fact, that's literally 1 page long. There's an afterword, and there's a book list. So, all you book nerds out there, fear not, because there's a book list of further reading and recommended reading, which we'll have a look at. And there's biography and reference articles about the author, Vernon Coleman, as well. So once again, big thank you to Vernon Coleman, who very kindly granted us permission to read the book in full on the channel. And that was really good of him to do that. He didn't have to do that, and he did. And now we all get to benefit from the contents of the book. And, you know, if you like it, if you think it's valuable, if you know someone out there who's kind of on the fence, who you think, oh, I could reach them, but it would need to be something that's kind of pithy and easy to digest, then you could consider getting them a copy of this book, right? He packs together names. He packs together organizations, groups. He's focusing on Agenda 21. So, of course, he's talking about sustainable development. He's talking about everyday things that we all see around us, like wind turbines. I think wind farms is coming up in the section that we're reading tonight. But things like facial recognition, smartphones, smart technology, smart meters, that's all in here. Electric cars, he talks about that. He hits on so many things that are relevant to all of us in our everyday lives that the people could get into this book. And you could consider buying it for somebody. Somebody you're like, oh, I've been trying to reach them. They kind of understand. They kind of get a few points that I'm making. I think I might be reaching through to them. Grab a copy. You know, it supports Vernon, and it might just be the thing that tips them over the edge and gets them asking more questions. At which point you can say, well, you know, there's a great channel on YouTube. It's called Hayes Reviews. And he reads lots of books that are important and interesting like this and reveal the agendas and the plans that we're living through. Check him out. But of course, do not feel obliged or pressured whatsoever to spread the word about Hayes Reviews. But if you want to do that, that's cool by me. So tonight, I don't really have any more of a preamble ramble prepared. We're just going to get straight into the book and finish it off, and then we'll call it a night because it's hot, humid. I haven't slept properly for a month now. Yes, my son is 1 month old, or 10 months old, I suppose, technically, because he was 9 months growing and what's the word? I was going to say hibernating. That's not the right word. Gestating in the womb. But he's been a month outside of it now, and it has been a very joyous month full of laughter and happiness, but not at all full of sleep. Not enough sleep by a long shot. So apologies if I'm stumbling over my words and being incoherent in my rambling more so than usual, but that's where I'm at the minute. So we're going to get on with the book. Before we do, I'll just remind you all that if you like what I do here, then there's a pinned link at the top of the chat, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. And you can find all the stuff that you need there, whether that might be to shoot me an email, find out the places where I broadcast. We're on Entropy, we're on Rumble, we're on Odyssey, we're on YouTube. But I also have a Twitter account, an Instagram account. I don't use them that much at the moment, but I will bring them to life at some point. Shoot me an email, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you if you've got a book to recommend, if you've got a question about the books that I read, or you're interested in what I do. And I'm always happy to hear from people and to build relationships and friendships and build a network, right? Because that's another important thing as well, is like seeking out these other people. And even if they're in different countries and different places in the world, staying in touch and establishing communications with them, if for no reason other than to know there's other people out there like you who are like-minded, who see what's going on, who care about the outcome for other people, and who are curious and want to know more, right? There are a lot of people out there, I think. They're not all necessarily watching this channel, but there are a lot of people out there because a lot of other channels that do this sort of thing and have very big followings, right? So knowing there's other people out there can be a huge weight off your shoulders as well. And just learning about these agendas and learning about these topics and these players and these schemes and the plans, just that alone can take a lot of weight off your shoulders, because it's not you who's broken, right? It's that you've been born into a system that is anti-human, and you're human, and this system is anti-human. This system is one of forced exploitation and extortion on every level. And if you want to grow and develop and get ahead in this system, then you have to emulate the people at the top of the system, which is to say you got to be more psychopathic, you got to be less empathetic, you got to be less compassionate, you got to be more cutthroat, more competitive, and you got to engage in more win-lose exchanges with other people. You're not rewarded with fame and glory and riches for creating win-win situations, for making situations where everybody benefits, right? You're rewarded for creating win-lose situations, for finding a way to get an edge on a competitor, for finding a way to shut down the competitor maybe, or steal some business from them. It might be in the world. I'm just thinking in the world of like corporations and business. There's only so much of the pie to go around. And then when you add on top of that the financial system, how it just is totally backed by nothing. It's just a small group of private individuals who get to say who gets the money and who prints it and who controls it and who has to use it. And they control the interest rate and the borrowing and lending rates. And they can just print more of it at any time, send it out into circulation, and that devalues the purchasing power of all the money that you have in the bank and that you're holding. And then, of course, usury and debt is just another control mechanism that we're born into, and nobody can reverse it. Apparently, it's just the only way we can do things on this planet is to run a debt system, and debt's just slavery. That's another word for slavery, right? If you're in debt, you don't own the asset, and you don't own the product of your labor, again, because you have to pay off the debt. You have to service the debt, and the debt keeps getting bigger. So what's the punishment for not being able to pay the debt? Oh, well, you owe us more. It just always boggles my mind that the punishment for not being able to pay back some money is, well, you got to pay back some money. Oh, you can't pay us the money you owe us? Now you owe us more money. But the problem is that I can't pay you the money that I owe you. Yeah, I know, but now you owe us more money because of that. So you owe us the money you owe us, and you owe us the money that you have to pay us because you can't pay us the money you owe us. It is just like the most blatantly exploitative and extortion-based system ever. And you've been born into that, and you can't really do that much about it. And that can be a weight off your shoulders to know that it's not you who's broken. It's not you that's failing to get ahead. It's not you that's... I mean, you are responsible to a certain extent. Of course, you have responsibility for your life and your circumstances and how you play the hand you've been dealt. I'm not trying to say there's no responsibility on each and every one of us. There is. But it can be a relief to know what we're up against, that it isn't a level playing field, that it's not all just about your work ethic and your attitude and your mentality, right? There's a lot more to it. And knowing the game, knowing the rules, knowing the players, and realizing that it's kind of rigged and stacked against you in many ways. It's not to say you can't break free and get ahead if you really diligently work at it, but it's just to say, go easy on yourself. Don't lay it all on your shoulders and say, I'm a failure and I'm useless and I'm worthless and all this kind of thing. It doesn't help. So it can be very cathartic to learn about these agendas. Realize that they go back a long time, and it's all by design. It is. I was playing around with this phrase earlier today. It's divide and conquer by design. That's what I was thinking. So I was thinking about all the different ways that we're divided, and how so many of these religions that are put out there, and I mean religions in the passio sense, right? So I mean religion in the sense of money as a religion, politics as a religion, and a very broad sense of the word, not just the main, the main Abrahamic religions. All these religions, religion just meaning a false belief that holds you back. There's so many of them out there, and they're all put out there on purpose to just divide people and get you like clashing with your neighbor, and not while the parasites kind of run away with all the goods and the loot, and keep transferring it into the pockets of their friends and their business partners and their family members. And we're down here sort of in the mud fighting each other over fake belief systems that have been created by who knows who created them at some point in the past, for the purpose of making sure we can never unite to create systems that work in more people's interest, right? So we're stuck in these systems. We were born into them. Brave and hardworking and courageous authors such as Vernon Coleman come along, write books telling us about the systems and what's going on in them. And then, morons like me buy the book. I'm not a moron for buying the book. I mean, I'm just a everyday guy. There's nothing special about me. I'm not academic. I'm not trained to read and dissect and analyze books and argumentation and logic and all that stuff, right? I just mean an everyday guy like me comes along and buys it and reads it to you. And we're very blessed that we can do that. And that is worthwhile. It's cathartic. It's beneficial for our spirit, our soul, our mind, our health, to know a little bit more about what's going on, to know that there are other people out there who also care about these things and talk to each other and make some friends and connections. It's a good way to spend a Friday night. So thank you for being here. Hasdak, I just saw you roll in. Good to see you there. And also Turbs, thank you for your very kind comment over on Rumble. Hasdak says, I went to the cab and got all my debt gone for £90. What's the cab? Is that like a taxi? Is there some magical taxi driver who can make debt disappear for 90 quid? Asmelia says, how much was the debt? 50 quid? Also, Asmelia says, I assume they will say, go live in a smart flat in a smart town, sign over your freedom, and we'll cancel your debt. Yeah, I feel like that's the deal. That's going to be the deal, isn't it? It'll be some sort of, I think there'll be some sort of financial, there's got to be an event that pushes us onto the new financial system and just really puts the last nail in the coffin of cash and the current financial system. They've got to do something that prompts a linking up of the digital ID to the digital money, and then the constant monitoring and surveillance all day, every day of everything you ever do. That but an event needs to happen, or maybe not. Maybe there doesn't need an event. It just needs to be this gradual sliding where they just alter something. You know, it's a slow tiptoeing process. They'll just alter a little bit and wait for that to become normal, and wait for a certain percentage of the population to adopt it, and then they'll just move a little bit more and wait for everyone to adopt that and a little bit more, and there'll be no rolling back of anything because it never is. They'll close down a few more ATM machines. They'll close down a few more bank branches. They'll stop minting as much cash and coins, and it'll just be this gradual transformation, which I'm saying gradual, but it'll probably be done in a very short amount of time, right? Hasdak cleared £19,000 for 90 quid. No catch. He went to the Citizens Advice Bureau. That's fantastic. I think you should definitely make a video on how to do that and teach other people, because that sounds like valuable knowledge. Or you can explain how to do it in the chat if you want, and I'll read it out, as long as it's not too complicated. So, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. If you want to support, shoot me a little donation. If you want to send me an email, that would be great. You can also join the book club. We kicked off the book club, the next reading in the book club on Wednesday night. We're reading The First Global Revolution, a report by the Council of the Club of Rome. This book is incredibly notorious. It's hard to find. It's ridiculously expensive. Hayes Reviews, the channel, was gifted a copy for the purpose of reading. And it's got the infamous quote, "The common enemy of humanity is man." Now, everyone knows that quote, but how many people actually read the book that it's from? If you're anything like me, the answer would be no, you haven't read it. So we're reading that now in the book club on Wednesday nights. If you join the book club, you can join those calls. You can get in on the discussion and watch it in real time, and have a back and forth, because it's good to throw ideas around conversationally with other people who are curious and care about these things. You never know what nuggets of insight and inspiration are revealed during conversations between like-minded individuals. It really brings a new dimension to the whole experience. And we're doing that every Wednesday night inside book club. Or you could just join book club and watch the replays. If you can't join us on Wednesdays, all the replays will be posted there as well. So that's something to consider. Now, seeing as we're finishing this book tonight, I'll also mention the next book we're doing on the channel is Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. We're going to be starting that next Friday. I'm very excited to read that one as well. It's another classic one, discussed very often by the likes of Alan Watt, Jay Dyer, and other people. After that, we've got the next two books lined up as well. After that one, we're going to do Foundations, Wormser, another classic book. It's Foundations, Their Power and Influence, all about philanthropic foundations. And then after that, we're going to do Julian Huxley's book, New Bottles for New Wine, which Julian Huxley coined the word transhumanism, and the first essay in this book is titled Transhumanism. So I'm very excited to read that one as well. So we have got our plan. Probably take us the rest of the year to polish off all those three books. Those books might even carry us into 2026. We shall see. It all depends on how much rambling and ranting that I do at the beginning of these videos. But for now that I've filled you in, now that I've told you where to support the show, and I've told you what's coming up, let's get into the book. We'll get the book cam. And we'll carry on and we'll wrap it up tonight. Frank, what's going on? Frank Lennon says, the 2 cent and 1 cent coins are now gone from Ireland. Been absent for some time. Also, the once upon a time high denomination euro notes. Right, so you can already see cash disappearing where you are, which I believe is Dublin. Yeah, it's amazing how quickly it changes. And just like the George Carlin quote, nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's George Carlin, American comedian. He does this whole bit on it's a big club and you ain't in it. And he's talking about how, nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. The owners of this country don't want you to wake up. The owners, you don't have politicians, you have owners. They own you. It's a big club and you aren't in it. And nobody seems to notice and nobody seems to care. It is very sad. It's very upsetting. But it's not true because we notice and we care and we talk about it amongst ourselves and we make videos and put it out there and support the people who do this kind of research and try and keep cash alive and try and do what we can to hedge our situation against these agendas, and that's worthwhile. It's meaningful. It's good to do, and I salute you all for taking part and being part of the resistance. Vive la résistance! Didn't know I could speak French, did you? Oui, oui. Sacre bleu. Dans ma trousse il y a une règle. Which means, in my pencil case, there is a ruler. Okay. As Amelia Dayful says, I shouted that in Sainsbury's. What did you shout? Melissa was good today. Is that what you shouted? I love shouting. I love crazy people ranting and shouting when I go to the supermarket. It always brightens up my my shop. Okay. So the first section we're going into tonight is talking to plants. Prince Charles believes that talking to plants helps them grow. What he probably doesn't realize is that when he speaks, he breathes carbon dioxide over his plants, and plants live on carbon dioxide. Charles wants a smaller global population. Does he realize that if there are fewer people, there will be less carbon dioxide? And if there is less carbon dioxide, there will be fewer plants or smaller plants. And, therefore, there will be less food available and more starvation. Charles appears to be an idiot and may well be. He's also immensely dangerous. We got off to a good start there. I wondered what he was going to be talking about in a section entitled Talking to Plants. But that little bit covers a lot. The important role of CO2. And it's a good example of doublethink. Because we're told, it's bad for the environment and it's really terrible and we've got to get rid of it. And then at the same time, every school child knows that CO2 is plant food, and the more of it there is, the more food there is for the plants, which means the plants grow, and then we have more plants, and which is really good news for vegans and vegetarians, right? Oh, as Amelia says, she shouted, nobody seems to notice in the middle of Sainsbury's. Good on you. Next time, though, if that didn't get the entire intended effect, next time you got to do the whole Carlin skit. Just climb up on a big pile of whatever. They have those piles of things. And I was going to say, like, toilet rolls, but you probably wouldn't be safe to do that. They'll be bouncing and falling down all over the place. Climb up on a stack of crates of beer or something and just do the whole skit from start to finish. It's about 10 minutes long. That'll get their attention. Or it'll get you arrested, one of the two. Make sure somebody's there to film it as well if you do that. I'd love to see that. All right, excellent section on talking to plants, and great to see Prince Charles getting a mention. Next section is taxes. The huge debts incurred in 2020 will mean that taxes will have to rise dramatically. There will be many new taxes introduced. And because the income raised through taxes won't be enough to pay off government debts, confiscation programs will be introduced. Taxes will soar and will help enrich the billionaires and impoverish everyone else. Confiscating personal property, houses, land, vehicles, and so on fits nicely with the Agenda 21 plan to ensure that the state owns everything and individuals own nothing. Billionaires and members of the royal family will not be affected by the new taxes and confiscation programs. No, of course they won't, because they're the ones who receive it all when it gets stolen from us. Teachers. The pupils know something is not quite right, said a school teacher, commenting on the fact that her students were being forced to obey a variety of scientifically unjustifiable regulations. Teachers betrayed their pupils during 2020. They kept schools closed when they need not have been closed. They demanded that pupils covered their faces. They insisted on pupils keeping a distance from one another. when they should have known that the measures they were demanding would serve absolutely no useful purpose, but would cause long-term psychological damage. They insisted on school closures when the closures were entirely unnecessary and merely did irreparable damage to the education of millions of students. And they allowed the installation of Wi-Fi in school classrooms when they should have been aware of the existence of evidence proving that Wi-Fi and cell phone systems in schools would do irreparable damage to the health of pupils. Yeah, it's always funny to me that these 5G Wi-Fi towers tend to be put up around schools and hospitals. They're always on the top of hospitals. Probably an accident. All right, next we got technocracy. A now prominent political philosophy which promotes the idea of scientists running the world. There's a lot more to be said on the topic of technocracy, but scientists running the world is definitely it, and we're kind of there. I think the whole Big C event was a flex to show us that we obey the scientists now. We obey the men in white coats, the men with the computer models, and women, and whatever they say goes, because they're not burdened with such irrational things as morals and intuition and considerations about the subjective well-being of human beings, right? They all they care about is the cold, hard facts, and they have the scientific method, and the science tells them the truth, and then we have to do what the science tells us to do, which is crazy, isn't it? Because science is an abstraction. It can't tell us anything. It actually... And all they've done really is replaced God with science. So in the past you had God, the priesthood, saying God wants you to stand 6 feet apart and wash your hands while singing Ba Ba Black Sheep. And God wants you to wear a rag on your face and inject yourself with experimental mRNA technology. Now it's just science tells us we have to ... do all that stuff. It's the same formula. It's exactly the same formula. It worked then. It continues to work today, but the people who go along with it are so smart. Oh, because we don't believe in none of that God stuff anymore. But a guy with a white coat and a clipboard comes along and says, hey, you want some gene therapy? And he's like, oh, yeah, I trust the scientists in Pfizer. Yeah, so it's just the same scam, rebranded, being rolled out again, basically. Next section is telephones. Try to find and buy an old-fashioned dial telephone which does not rely on electricity. If there is a major power outage, you will still be able to communicate with others who have similar old-fashioned telephones. Oh, good advice. Good tip. Television. This is a quote. Our job is to give people not what they want, but what we decide they ought to have. That's Richard Salant, former president of CBS News in the U.S. So I've got a lot to say about television. The most important resource, I think, is 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. You can buy that for about £6 or £7 on eBay. It's really cheap to get a copy of that book, written in 1978. And one of the things I was thinking about recently is how when you watch things on television, once that image goes in your mind, it cannot be taken out again. And people don't really think of it that way. But the violence, the sex, the gore, the lighting, the flashing, the graphics, the animations, whatever it is, it all goes in. Unfiltered, unanalyzed. It just all goes in and gets downloaded to your subconscious mind, most of it. And you can't take it out of there again without some serious inner work, probably involves some meditative, hypnotic type of practice. And that's something to bear in mind. That imagery goes in and it stays in. So guard what you take into your mind. Be very diligent about what you let in there, what you watch, what you look at. Because none of it is put out there for your benefit. None of the mainstream stuff. And there never has been, right? So that's all I'll say on television. I've got a little project in the pipeline to do with television, but I won't say any more about it right now. Temporary. Temporary measures, as introduced by governments, are never temporary. They invariably become permanent. The so-called temporary measures will remain to remind us that we are in danger and should therefore be ever fearful. The hypoxia caused by covering mouth and nose will, of course, make citizens ever more stupid and accepting, thereby conditioning them and preparing them to accept future tyrannies. Yeah, of course. The temporary measures are never temporary, and yet every time they say they're going to roll out and give themselves some temporary powers, people cheer it on and they accept it and they go along with it. Because there's no memory, there's no ability to recall the last time this happened or to look in other places where this has happened. You know, a great example is America after September the 11th. The Patriot Act, the forces, the powers, that were rolled out and granted, never been rolled back. We got a Matsia11A on YouTube. Good to have you here. Hello. Saying the UK's public switch telephone network, which includes the plain old telephone system, is set to be switched off by 2025. I didn't know that. Thank you for that tidbit. So it's going to be switched off this year, or it already has been, right? So PSTN, plain old telephone system, POTS, is going to be gone soon. So good advice from Vernon Coleman, but they're already one step ahead, and they're planning to shut that means of communication down. So we're going to have to go back to smoke signals. But then, you know, setting fire to something would probably end up getting accused of contributing to climate change, and we'll get put in a cage or something. So I don't know. Carrier pigeons? Oh, but then there'll be like a pigeon flu epidemic, and they'll have to come and kill all the pigeons. Yeah, it's tricky. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do. Okay, we got Terra Carta Pledge. Prince Charles has urged businesses to sign the Terra Carta Pledge to put the planet first. This nonsense is part of Agenda 21's plan for a sustainable future. It will be interesting to see if Charles decides to do his bit for a sustainable future by putting an end to his peregrinations around the world by private aeroplane. Frank says, get yourselves walkie-talkies. Why not? All right, terror. Terror is always used to intimidate, to gain power, to push through laws, and to usurp human rights. The advocates of Agenda 21 have used a campaign of terror and its antithesis and regular companion, fear, to drive their agenda. Yeah, terror and fear. And what's interesting, and I don't know the significance of it, probably just an accident, isn't it? But if you look at this word here, which is terror, and then you look at this word here, which is terror, and you know, they sound the same, and they're almost identical, and phonetically they're the same. Terror, terror. You know, and I don't know why exactly or how that came to be that way, but could it be that there's it's just a way of signaling that terrorism is just a war on Earth and its inhabitants, namely us, right? Plus, not to mention that the next section is terrorism, so he might mention it in this section. But okay, terrorism. On the 2nd of July 2020, I defined terrorism as using intimidation and violence in the pursuit of political aims. There can be no doubt that governments everywhere have been using intimidation to pressurize us into being scared of their fashionable version of the flu bug. And there is no doubt that governments are using violence to oppress their citizens. My conclusion is that our governments are terrorists. Brilliant. It is our duty to oppose them, to defeat them, and to ensure that they are punished. If we don't stand up for ourselves, they will continue to oppress us with what I long ago described as intellectual terrorism. That's a good phrase. I hadn't really heard of that one before. Intellectual terrorism. That's a handy one. But yeah, I was going to make the point, and I made it in the first reading we did of First Global Revolution, that governments are largely responsible for terrorism when you really get into it and look at where terrorist cells get their funding, get their arms. You know, it's governments and intelligence agencies, and usually, quite often, it's the British and the Americans. Because people think of terrorists as just these ragtag bunch of kind of freedom fighters who want to stick it to the man, and they're living in caves and they're just cobbling weapons together out of twigs and moss or whatever they can find. And they're not. They're like groups that are funded and backed by governments and intelligence agencies and given resources and given weapons and told where and how to use those, often in service of or in alignment with the goals and the agendas of those governments and intelligence agencies. So it's worth bearing that in mind. But I totally agree with this assessment that our governments are terrorists, for sure. And if they're not straight up terrorists, they certainly create terrorists and support terrorists, right? And support terror. Going back to what I said at the start, whereby your tax money is sent off to facilitate the slaughtering of innocent people in another country, right? If that's not terror, I don't know what is. And you and I are funding it by way of our taxes, which, is not a popular thing to point out and remind people of. They always want to say things like, we need to get the government to stop funding Israel, right? And it's like, it's not the government funding Israel, it's you and me. It's the taxpayers. We're the ones who fund the government, and they decide how much of that money to send over to our good friends in Israel. But the money's coming from us. But actually, even saying that is kind of unfair, because it's really our employers. Unless we are self-employed and file our own taxes, if you have an employment where you are in the pay-as-you-earn system, then it's your employer who's giving that money to the government to give to Israel. And then if you work for a company who works for the government, like I do, not in all cases, but sometimes we do commissions, and we're we're employed or hired by the government. It's just a very weird circle at that point, because the government's paying us with money that they've collected through taxes, which we then have to pay tax on when we get paid, that goes back to them. It's a real stupid, convoluted system when you actually get into it and start looking at it. But yeah, they're terrorists, or they're funding terror, or they're responsible for terrorism. Definitely. Well said, Vernon. Okay, we got test and trace apps. These remarkably badly designed applications are collecting private and personal information from millions of gullible citizens. The information will be shared with the police and doubtless the tax authorities. Many individuals are reported to have given false names and details when required to give personal information when entering cafes, pubs, restaurants, churches, and other buildings. In late October, during the Welsh autumn restrictions, 2 pubs were closed because customers had given fake names and details. The authorities became suspicious when 479 people called M. Hancock attended one public house in a single week. Suspicions were aroused still further when it was discovered that all had given the number of a disused telephone box in Cardiff as their contact number. On the other hand, 1,543 people who had given their name as Jones really were called Jones. I'm told that some individuals are so determined not to give their personal details to strangers that they have had fake visiting cards printed. Such cards do not cost much, I am told, and when offered as evidence of identification, look satisfactorily official. In view of the real physical risks involved, before you accept any test which involves a physically invasive procedure, you should write down the date and time, the place where the test is being performed, and the name of the person doing the test. You should also make a note of the qualifications of the tester and under whose authority they are performing the test. Few people seem to think it odd that they have to be tested regularly to see if they have acquired an allegedly dangerous disease. It would seem reasonable to assume that someone who had a deadly disease might have noticed that they have symptoms. And since the infectious symptoms associated with the disease are pretty much the same as the flu, coughing and sneezing, it would seem rather likely that sufferers would be aware of the condition. As an aside, how can you spread a disease if you don't have the symptoms which are recognized as the methods by which the disease is spread? At least one major study has shown that asymptomatic transmission does not occur. Well, that is quite a logic bomb. Those two, mainly that paragraph there. And these are the kind of things that once you started to ask these questions and you were noticing these inconsistencies and these illogical kind of aspects to what was going on, that was the point at which you couldn't turn it off. That was the point at which once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? And I remember I almost lost my job for not wearing a mask in a room with one other person who was wearing a mask, and I was seen with my mask off, and I was reported by a do-gooder, and I got suspended from work for a month. And then I had to go for, there was a whole investigation carried out, and my colleagues were interviewed, and 5 of us were suspended. 4 of us were dismissed, and I was not dismissed. And on my the final interview, when they handed out the verdict, they asked me, they said, Nick, are you aware that there's such a thing as asymptomatic carriers? And I said, no, I'm not aware of that. because it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like he mentions here, if you're coughing and sneezing, that's how you spread it, and that's how you've got it, right? So this asymptomatic thing, another aspect of the scam that people bought hook, line, and sinker, unfortunately. But, apply a little bit of critical thinking, ask a few questions, and it would crack the whole thing wide open, and you'd be off to the races from that point on. But yeah. Okay, the next one is actually quite synchronous because, of course, as I just told you, this is the next book we're reading. And this man down here, Zbigniew Brzezinski, I think that's how you say it, Brzezinski? Zbigniew Brzezinski. He founded the Trilateral Commission. Yes, he did. And guess who else was in the Trilateral Commission? Jeffrey Epstein. And guess who else was in the Trilateral Commission? Keir Starmer. And it goes on and on and on from there. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when we start reading Between Two Ages. But I thought it was worth mentioning. Oh, it says it right here. There you go. So it's a nice little setup for the next book that we're going to be reading on the channel anyway. So, the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission, founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski, was created as a new international economic order. It was perhaps the forerunner of globalization. The developing short-term aim was to abolish national state and personal sovereignty, to reform global trade, to introduce mass surveillance, promote the Internet of Things, roll out extensive cellular networks, and, perhaps most significant of all, to censor all opposition, to demonize all critics, and to stamp out all debate of these issues. Now, what I'm reminded of here is it's kind of what the Rockefellers did, isn't it? With their oil empire, right? The censor opposition, demonize critics, stamp out debate of what they were doing, reinvent their image as philanthropic, penny dispensing good guys. So it's the same sort of playbook, but on a national scale, on an international scale. And don't forget the famous quote from David Rockefeller's memoirs, where he admits to being a proud internationalist, and he says, "I stand guilty as charged." That's a very important quote as well. So continuing, the ultimate aim was to lead to a technocratic world. The country is now regarded as closest to the ideal is China, where communism has been the stepping stone to the New World Order, also known as communitarianism. In the rest of the world, socialism and far-left liberalism have provided the necessary political framework for the progression of Agenda 21. And that's all he's got to say about the Trilateral Commission. But we're going to learn a lot more about trilaterals, what do they call it? The tricoms, when we dig into Zbigniew Brzezinski next week. I'll have some more meaty preamble rambles prepared for you at that point. Hopefully, if I can get some sleep between now and then. Okay, we got thermal scanner. A thermal scanner is a completely useless device held by a person dressed in the sort of costume popularized by astronauts, but with a plastic apron added. The instrument is held a few inches or a foot or so from the forehead of the subject and used to measure the temperature. Thermal scanners are widely used to diagnose specific diseases, though in truth, in this regard, holding a donut near to the subject's head would provide equally useful information. And don't forget, if you get down to your local vaccination station, you can get a free donut with your injection today. They were really doing that. Cheeseburgers and donuts and blowjobs were just some of the incentives offered with the COVID injections. But yeah, those thermal scanners, the thing that stood out to me about them was that they were kind of gun-like and they were pointed at your head. And we were just suddenly all queuing up and having a gun-shaped object pointed at our heads by strangers. And I had to do that to get on a coach. I remember traveling home for Christmas, bag of presents, go back for Christmas for a week, stay with the family. This is when I lived further away. And then, they're doing everyone, and you think, right, do I submit and have the plastic gun thermometer pointed at my head? Or do I kick up a fuss and piss off everyone in the queue and my wife potentially, and miss the coach and have to buy more tickets and et cetera, et cetera. So Very strange times that we lived through. Hey, remember that. But yeah, they were gun shapes. And in the place where I was working, we were told we had to measure it was a residential building. There was residents' flats. We were on hand to help them out if they needed it. But we had to take their temperatures. I think it was every 2 hours or 3 hours throughout the day. We would have to go around and do these temperature checks with this little thermometer gun thing. And actually, I remember one of the guys I worked with, this was when I worked with learning disabilities. And one of the residents who I was working with, I held the thing to his head. And I was in a playful mood, and I made a joke. I made a joke about it being a gun. I was like, oh, bang, like that, And he got so mad and angry at me, and I felt very bad about it. He was like, don't do that. And he shouted at me. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. That was a really bad joke. It wasn't funny, kind of dark, but you got to have a dark humor sometimes in these kind of places to get through, But it was just amazing how he just got so angry and kind of incensed at that crack that I did feel bad about that. I apologized to him, and he forgave me, and we were friends again immediately. A few seconds later, because he had a very short attention span. He didn't hold a grudge for most things. So, but yeah, thermal scanners shaped like guns pointed at our heads. Strange times that we lived through. I wonder when they'll bring those back. Frank says, thermal scanner, not good for the pineal gland. Laser? Question. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good question, actually. I don't know. Lasers are very powerful. Lasers can have profound effects on human biology. They can be used for healing. They can be used for harming, right? And my question was a lot of things. Why, before lockdowns and COVID, why were swabs always done in the cheek and now suddenly they were done in the nose? Why were thermometers always done with the little mercury ones under the armpit or under the tongue, and suddenly it was the digital gun ones? There were all these things that just happened and were rolled out at that time that I'd never seen done before anywhere else under any other context or circumstance. And that was one of them. So it's very strange times. As Amelia says, I said I'm exempt. If they asked, I was going to say because I have a brain. Yeah, I know. I should have definitely put up more resistance to these sort of things back in the day. But as I've said before, it was a confusing time, and I wasn't awake and wise and aware to the stupidity of it all in the early days. I was very overwhelmed and confused and scrambling to find some good information that made sense and wasn't just fear-based. So it took me a while to catch on, I will say that. Adam says, pre-planned for a long time in think tanks, I feel. I tend to agree with you on that. Yeah, I think war-gamed, these scenarios are run. They roll out these modeling. So actually, let's have a little detour here. We'll have a little detour. So remember, Neil Ferguson rolled out his model, and he's done it on numerous occasions, and he said, I've got this computer model, and the cows have got mad cow disease, and the model tells us we need to kill 100 million cows, or whatever the number was. It wasn't that many. I'm exaggerating, but or he has this computer model, and he says, 25% of the world's population are going to die, so we need to lock everyone at home and close down the gyms and the churches and keep the off licenses open for 3 years, right? Because the computer says so. Remember, how we've been conned by computer models before? Well, in this book by the Club of Rome, First Global Revolution, in the introduction, they make a really kind of a surprising admission. I think it was the introduction. I'll see if I can find it quickly. But they basically say that our modeling can't be relied on. Yeah, here we go. So remember, the Club of Rome is the group that brought us the Limits to Growth, which was a computer model that said, there's too many people and we're all going to die from pollution and overconsumption and materialistic. So we're going to have to halt the brakes and go into a reversal of our trajectory, which was increasing material prosperity and freedom. We're going to have to reverse all that because the computer says so. Well, in this report, this is 1991, it says forecasting is both necessary and will necessarily be a relative failure. simple extrapolation of existing trends will not give us realistic answers. Right? So next time they try and lead you down the garden path with a computer model, tell them, you know what, the Club of Rome says relative failure and will not get realistic answers from extrapolating the trends and forecasting. And these are smart people in the Club of Rome. I think we should listen to them and do what they say in the first global revolution. But the reason I mention computer modeling and forecasting, Adam, is because I think they have more advanced models for predicting our behavior based on all the information they hoover up by way of the internet now. And I do think they pre-planned these kind of things, and they kind of, to me, it was like it was such a diabolically clever scam, because it brought people to kind of the very edge without making them break. Some people broke, that's always going to happen, but it got the vast majority of people to go along with stupid, ritualistic, embarrassing behaviors. Teapots on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. on the front street, pots and pans for the NHS. It got the vast majority of people to go along with a load of embarrassing, ridiculous rituals and behaviors, without alarming so many of them that it didn't work. They played it so well. Like they knew that some people were going to get cotton onto it and say, this is bullshit, I'm not doing it. They knew that some would. But I think they'd calculated and factored it in so that they knew that the amount of people that this would wake up who would kick back and refuse wouldn't be enough, and they'd actually still get the majority of people. I don't know, I might be ascribing too much devious scheming intelligence to these people, but I have a feeling that it is very well known ahead of time, the numbers, who's going to go along, who's going to push back, how are we going to ensure compliance, how many people. I think they know relatively well beforehand, because they're masters of human psychology, and because we are the most studied creatures on the planet. And I think there is nothing that is not known about human psychology and how to manipulate it and the human mind. And I do think that is the information that they keep secret to themselves and that they leverage over the world's populations, Yes, as Asmelia says, 6 feet safe, 5 feet danger. No, it was more like, he's even 5'9" danger, 5'11" danger. But just go that extra inch and you're safe. Phew. It was all bonkers. Just absolute bonkers. Of course, we can all see that now in hindsight, can't we? But yeah, that thermal scanner. Oh, I'm just going to have a sip, but we got Tarot Galaxy here. Alan Watt said they have thousands of psychologists working for them, helping them to steer to steer things, yeah. That's what I think is the ultimate occulted knowledge. It's just the human psyche and how to manipulate it, how to control it. And that is what is used, because what else could it be? They probably have technologies, and they probably have laser beams and supercomputers and all that kind of jazz. But ultimately, you got to know you've got to know your enemy, and we're the enemy, as they announced in this book. They announced that we're the enemy. Page 115. Humanity is the enemy of man. And you got to know your enemy. You got to know what makes them tick. You got to know their pressure points, their weak spots, what's going to cause them to panic, how you're going to press their buttons, and how you're going to walk them down the garden path to their own slaughter. So it's kind of like a Machiavellian playbook, but utilizing human psychology, Okay, too many tangents. Read the book. Next section is truth. It's another quote from the movie The Big Short, which is a pretty good film, actually. I like that. And it's a book. I don't know if it was a book before it was a film. Michael, I can't see the guy's last name, but The Big Short is a book. I got a copy of it up there on my finance shelf. It's a great film, and it's a very revealing insight into how finances work, how foreknowledge of massive crashes exists and is leveraged, and and how these crashes are weaponized to harm the majority and benefit the few. If you're in the big club, George Carlin's big club, then you might be let in on that foreknowledge and you'll be able to position yourself appropriately. But the quote is, truth is like poetry, and most people hate fucking poetry. From The Big Short. That is a quote and a half. I like that one. I don't think it's fair to say most people hate poetry. Everyone likes a good rhyme. But a lot of poetry doesn't rhyme. And that's where people are like, ooh, I'm not sure about it. If it doesn't rhyme, is it really poetry? Tammy says, I think Event 201 accounted for the pushback. Yeah, Event 201 was a real eye-opener. And just the fact that they were wargaming this exercise, which reminds me, isn't there a new giant pandemic wargaming scenario going on at some point? I think it's called Pegasus here in the UK. I think so. Someone can fact check me on that. Taro also says, Alan Watts said they never deviate from the plan. Even when there's setbacks, the plan must go ahead. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think this is a long-term plan, and they don't deviate. Because why would they when it's working? All right, we got a quote from Mark Twain. Quote, it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Yes, ain't that the truth? I'm sure everyone on this call knows. knows the reality of that quote only too well. Okay, this one, two-tier society. He says, a two-tier society is coming fast. The top tier will consist of those who have been jabbed. The lower tier will be those who have not been jabbed. This will divide families and friends more dramatically than traditional divisions, and the divide will be permanent. This will be a class system, and those in the lower tier will be a definite underclass. They will be outlaws. Now, I kind of think, for me personally, I haven't noticed this. Jabbed, unjabbed, I get on with all my jabbed and unjabbed people just as well as I did before. So there's no lingering, overt difficulties there. But I think subconsciously it's something that the people are aware of. And it kind of lingers and influences things from a distance. Not in a overt way where arguments are had about it specifically, but just a sense of, you know, we made this decision, you made that decision, and that puts a bit of distance between us, right? But we haven't quite got to the two-tier society that Vernon was forecasting. But it is interesting that we ended up having, remember, two-tier Keir, and that whole fiasco about the way that protesters were being treated, and that was, he kind of foreshadowed a sort of two-tier society. Not quite exactly the one they envisaged, though. So the next section is UN and carbon emissions. The United Nations has requested individual nations to reduce their carbon emissions by 25%. Those countries which agreed to what was in practice a demand abandoned their national sovereignty to an unelected, unofficial world government. There was never any scientific evidence to support the theory that global warming exists, whatever the cause, or was a significant threat to mankind. But despite the lack of evidence, limits were placed on economic development. Standards of living were reduced, and fossil fuel power generators were closed, all to fit the aims of Agenda 21. Yeah, it's bonkers. The hypocrisy. Melissa from Cutting Through the Matrix was talking on a recent, I think, Real History or maybe a Redux intro about how much power is going to be needed for these like AI data centers, for the grid, the control grid, the digital control grid that's being built is going to need crazy amounts of power and water and resources to get them up and running and functioning. And that's just going to go ahead. No one's going to question that. No one's going to point the finger at it. No one ever points the finger at the military and their use of fossil fuels and their production of CO2, right? There's certain things which are totally impervious and untouched in this whole conversation. And instead, it's me and you and our yogurt pots and our diesel cars and our steak dinners and the number of children that we have and the number of holidays we go on. We're the ones who have to suffer the brunt, change our lifestyles, pay the taxes and the fines and the increased costs for the things that we want to do that we've been used to doing for our entire lives. Meanwhile, they're funneling all these resources into more military weapons development and military excursions in other places, as well as the development of the digital control grid, the data processing centers, and these AI overlords that they're trying to put into place, right? Next is United Nations. And I'll mention as well that we did a read through of a book called The Fearful Master by G. Edward Griffin. That's on the playlist tab. If you want to learn more about the United Nations and the dark side of that organization, that's a really good book and a really good place to start. It was an excellent read. Quite a roller coaster, quite powerful, upsetting, quite gruesome in some places, but fact-packed. A little bit of its time in that G. Edward Griffin back then was very scared, not scared, but very keen to be like, oh, it's the communists, you know, and it fell into that sort of Red Scare type way of thinking without really realizing that it's the same people funding the communists and the non-communists, right? But he's since done more research and learning and kind of corrected himself on that. But the book was written, I think it was in the 70s. Tiny little paperback book. I'm really blessed to have a copy of this. Let's just check. Was it 73? 64. There you go. So even older than I thought. So it was written in the 60s. So you got to bear that in mind when you read it. But excellent playlist, excellent read through. Nothing to do with me. I just mean the book is excellent, and you know we got a lot out of following along G. Edward Griffin's words and his evidences, and he built it on a fairly good foundation of other books. I bought at least another 10 books off the back of reading that one. Some contemporary accounts of Katanga and the people who went there. I've got Connor Cruz O'Brien's book. This one here, which is called To Katanga and Back. All right, so he was the UN kind of envoy representative. He was sent over there to you know, sort things out. Got this guy as well. This is Smith Hempstone. He did the Katanga Report. This one is a real SOB, stinky old book. But yeah, Katanga Report, Smith Hempstone. So what went on there, pretty well referenced and backed up in a multitude of sources. And it was just good to see that G. Edward Griffin was marshalling good evidence from a wide variety of sources, and that those sources were still available for purchase. So I recommend anybody who hasn't to go and check out the Fearful Master playlist. That's a really good one. You know, if you've got time. You know, if you've got about 60 hours to spare. Twiddling your thumbs. Maybe you got a long flight. Maybe you got a long weekend off work or a bit of annual leave to burn through or something. Yeah. Frank Lennon says it was his first book. He was commissioned to write it. Thank you for that. Yeah. So that's you're talking about Connor Cruz O'Brien, I believe. Yeah. So let's see what Vernon Coleman has to say about the United Nations. The United Nations was originally set up with the goals of ending world hunger and achieving peace on Earth. It was set up in 1945, but since 1959, the John Birch Society in the USA has fought, without success, to take the USA out of the UN, claiming quite accurately that its true goal was to set up a world government. The UN has created its own army and has pushed for a world tax. Today, the UN is recognized as a corrupt organization which has done much harm. For example, its record on bribery and favoritism and the Iraq oil for food scandal. Unelected individuals, mostly appointed as a favor or a reward, run the organization, and its subsidiaries such as the World Health Organization and the UN's aim appears to be to deprive the world's population of independence, freedom, democracy, privacy, and dignity, and to impose a totalitarian rule. Their plan was always to use fear to control the world's population and to use political correctness and false health and safety regulations to frighten people and to promise them a world free of risks, albeit free of freedom. The cult of global warming has been used to promote the UN's aims. The UN's plans, this is a really good section. The UN's plans include the reform of education and redesigning it to dumb down teaching and to produce semi-literate, semi-numerate citizens. Agenda 21 also plans to replace traditional medical care with an endless series of inoculation programs. Oh, Frank Lennon says, no, it wasn't. It was Ed Griffin's first book, and he was commissioned to write it. Thank you for that reminder. Was it his first book? I thought he did one on cancer first, and that was, yeah. Well, I'll take your word for it, Frank. You are a wise man, and you are rarely wrong in what in our many years of dealings together. I can say that. Frank says, I recently published a Substack article on the UN. Okay, excellent. If you send that over to me, Frank, I'll put it out on the Hayes Reviews chat for anybody who wants to check it out. All right, back to the book. The UN's plans, we just read that bit. To achieve its aims, the UN needs to eliminate sovereignty, nationalism, individualism, and all human ambition and motivation. It was because of its opposition to nationalism and sovereignty that the establishment was so opposed to Brexit. Many of those who supported the EU did so out of a misunderstanding of the aims of the European Union. Not a few wanted the UK to stay in the EU because they were worried that if Brexit went ahead, they would not be able to purchase Italian shoes or French wines quite so readily. The UN long ago gave itself rights and powers it was never intended to have. It has given itself authority over the world's climate, the environment, health, safety and education, and it has told national sovereign governments what plans they must put in place and what time frame they must follow. The UN has 17 specific goals and 169 subsidiary goals. These sound wholesome until you dig down and find out it is intended that the goals are achieved and what the mealy-mouthed platitudes really mean. The UN, which follows an agenda which most of us would regard as communist, though it is communist with Luciferian overtones, wants wealth and technology to be redistributed and private property to be put into the public domain. I gotta say as well, in this section here, Ed Griffin's book does a great job of explaining why it might be that the UN seems so communist in nature. And it's just because it's full of communists. Like, just its founding, the people involved in setting it up in the first place, the people who occupy the certain posts in the UN, which are always occupied by delegates from, the former USSR. So it's overtly and not controversial, true. It's just a statement of fact that it has communists in there. And Ed Griffin's book explains it and names them, tells you where they're from, and gives you all the lowdown on that. So, but that is why. And then if you want to know why, communism is kind of linked to Luciferianism, you might want to read a book such as Marx and Satan? Oh, you might be able to hear William in the background there. Marx and Satan. By Richard Wurmbrand, who I think is writing from a Catholic point of view. But yeah, this whole book, I haven't read this one yet, but I believe it is explaining the link between Marx and Satan, and Lucifer is another name for Satan. And then somebody might be like, no, Lucifer's a totally different person, just a morning star trying to bring knowledge to humanity and free us from the yoke of the evil demiurge who enforces rules on us. And I don't want to get into all that stuff. It's very interesting, though. Can you hear him? Sounds like he's hungry. So, their aim is collectivism, putting the global state or world government as run by or through the United Nations above all individual human rights. Bizarrely, the UN has blamed the world's woes on patriarchy. There has never been any attempt to explain this claim or to provide any evidence in support of the allegation. The UN appears not to believe in evidence or science, preferring to make its judgments without such distractions. The myth of global warming is used as the framework for this takeover and is the excuse for controlling education, a massive program of confiscation, relocating people into centralized mega smart cities, and a huge program of depopulation. The UN has become extraordinarily adept at capitalizing on tragedy, whether real or man-made, and uses tragedy as yet another excuse for increased government intervention. At the 1992 summit in Rio de Janeiro, there was a call for sustainable development, and local councils and community activists were recruited to demand that environmental policies be initiated. However, these policies were manipulated at global level. Now, what's interesting is 1992, the Rio de Janeiro summit. What came out the year before that? The First Global Revolution is a 1991 publication. With its infamous quote about how the environmental problems need to unite the world's people, and human causes the environmental problems, therefore humans are the bad guys and they're the enemy. That comes out in 1991. And then what happens in 1992? Bish bash bosh. Problem, reaction, solution. There you go. And Frank Lennon Eagle Eye Frank just spotted that Darwin got a mention in this book on Marx and Satan. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Frank. Down here, chapter 7, Marx, Darwin, and Revolution. So Darwinian evolution, which became kind of social Darwinism, and that's no good. Let's put it that way. So, continuing, aggressive recycling policies have been introduced with fines on councils and individuals introduced in the EU through the European Union to force them through. The recycling programs were never practical, and much of the carefully sorted material has been exported to be buried or burnt. Indeed, the recycling program was never about recycling. It was always about control. The policies have, of course, been global. In California and the USA, homeowners were threatened with jail if they cleared the bush around their homes, because doing so would endanger a local species of rat which lived in the bush. The resultant fires destroyed millions of dollars worth of homes. The rats moved away because of the fires. In the UK, well-built Victorian homes were demolished and replaced with poorly built modern homes built to poor modern standards. This was all part of the program to force people into relocating into flats in smart cities. The destruction of local businesses, which reached a zenith in 2020, and the absurd environmental rules built upon the nonsense of global warming were also designed to force individuals into smart cities. I have seen one report which states that the UN, which is most decidedly not in any way a democratic institution and which has no elected officials, has around 3,000 employees. This seems a trifle on the light side, since the Secretariat alone has 41,000 employees, and the total number of people being paid by the UN is considerably higher. The Chief Executive's Board for Coordination gives figures for 2012 of 30,723 plus 52,596. 2012 seems to be the latest available figure. And this doesn't include subsidiaries such as the World Health Organization or the peacekeeping force, which comprises of soldiers from individual countries. Peacekeeping. Yeah. There are many perks for UN employees. So, for example, if UN staff are required to pay tax on their salaries and emoluments in the country where they are working, then the General Assembly will reimburse staff so that they pay no tax. This seems rather strange for an organization which is attempting to force a communist approach to life onto the rest of the world, and which is promoting a better and more sustainable society. During the Iraq War, the United Nations banned many imports into Iraq. The UN's ban included medicine, blood, and other essentials such as water purifiers, and as a result, 1 in 10 children died before their first birthday. American attacks had pretty well destroyed Iraq's sewage and water treatment systems, and the absence of water purification substances meant that contaminated water had to be drunk. American bombing had also destroyed the Iraqi power grid, but the sanctions prevented the importing of parts needed for repairs. The absence of food meant that parents sometimes had to choose between children, keeping one alive rather than seeing 2 children die of starvation. The total number of children dying as a result of the UN sanctions is not known, but believed to be greater than 1.5 million. The United Nations is, without a doubt, an evil organization. The plan is to create hell on earth. Yeah, well said. That's a really good section on the UN. Universal basic income. The idea of governments paying their citizens a universal basic income has been around for a long time. It's now getting closer to reality. In the UK, the benefits system and the tax credit system are already providing a universal basic income for millions. Furlough schemes are accustoming citizens to accepting a regular paycheck from the government. Providing every citizen with a monthly payment would cost a good deal of money, but it would save billions currently wasted on administration and fraud. I used to regard a basic income as a good idea. In my book, Bloodless Revolution, I pointed out that if the state paid us all a citizen's basic income, this would free everyone from exploitation, eradicate the need for unemployment or welfare benefits, ensure a much fairer tax system, eradicate poverty, end involuntary prostitution, and do much to reduce crime levels and encourage people to work in order to increase their income. The citizen's basic income would stop people feeling resentment about their neighbours who didn't work, and it would allow the government to find more productive employment for the vast army of bureaucrats involved in administrating the huge variety of state benefits. The saving to the nation would be phenomenal. Millions of man-hours would be freed for more creative enterprises. In the UK, social security payments currently cost the nation well over $200 billion a year. Paying the bureaucrats and administering the payments costs half as much again. With 10 million pensioners, the state pension scheme costs at least another £60 billion, and the numbers are rising fast, and administering the nation's pension scheme costs billions more. Pensions and other payments to former civil servants and public sector workers also cost billions. Giving every adult in the country a lifetime income of, say, £10,000 a year would be cheaper than our current state pension and benefits program, and it would be simpler and fairer and better both for individuals and for the state. But things have changed. Today, the universal basic income is being used as a form of control over the population. Regretfully, I no longer think it is a good idea. And then you couple the universal basic income with programmable digital money, which will not work on products and services that you are unauthorized to pay to purchase because your social credit score is not where it needs to be. That's another angle and aspect of it. If it was just cash in hand, but they will never do that. It would be a UBI that is totally fully transparent to the government, I think, and programmable, that you can't save. It'll be deleted if you try and save it, and it'll be tied to your quota of meat and alcohol and travel and carbon dioxide produced by the goods and services that you purchase, right? That's what I think it will look like. So I'm not surprised, and I'm glad that do you know what? This is really great. A good example here of changing your opinion and changing your mind and holding your hand up and saying, look, I was wrong about what I thought my opinion was and what I believed before. I've learned more information has come to my attention. Things have changed, and I hold my hand up and I change my mind. And I don't stand by those things that I said before. I actually think it's a bad idea now. And it's just a good example to see somebody doing that, a public figure doing that, writing it down in a book and explaining why. Because we can all do that. We don't have to dig our heels in. We don't have to be fearful of being proven wrong and admitting that we made a mistake. You know, have a bit of humility that you don't know everything, that you can't know everything, that there's so much mis and disinformation out there. Good luck getting to the bottom of anything really in this day and age. And, you know, be humble, be curious, and, you know, be willing to be wrong. And when you are wrong, admit it. You know, that's pretty, in my opinion, it's pretty good advice. Unless you're never wrong, in which case, don't worry about it, disregard it. But who's never wrong? All right, veganism. Do you think it's an accident that veganism has suddenly become popular? It isn't. They don't want us eating animals. It takes up too much time. It's a slow, messy process. They want us eating the food they are making in laboratories. Some of it will, of course, look and taste like meat. I happen to be ovo-vegan. I do eat free-range eggs, but it's my choice. I don't approve of people being forced to behave in a particular way, even though I might approve of the end result. The means is unacceptable. Again, a very good example of a mature opinion, right? I've just done spirals there. I just meant to do little circles. I don't want to be doing spirals. People know what spirals means. It's good that he says, I don't approve of people being forced to behave in a particular way. He says, this is my choice. This is what I do. This is my choice, and I think it works best. But I'm not going to force people to follow my way of doing things, right? I guess it's another great example of just mature thinking. So, good on you, Vernon Coleman. All right, we've got vertical farming. Vertical farming is a silly name for factory farming. The followers of Agenda 21 constantly change the nomenclature they favor. So, for example, they changed global warming to global cooling to climate change. Many of the words and phrases they use are devised by psychologists and then altered if they do not serve the correct purpose. Yeah, it's an important... Again, that's what I'm always saying. They rebrand. They come up with terminology. They realize that people are getting wise to a specific phrase or way of describing things, and they change it. But it's the same thing underneath the label. Okay, vitamin D. Vitamin D deficiency is very common among the ill, especially those who have infections. Locking people indoors massively increases the risk of vitamin D deficiency, and the symptoms and health risks of vitamin D deficiency are massive. Vitamin D deficiency doesn't just increase the risk of contracting an infection, there's also an increased risk of heart disease, asthma, cancer, and dementia. Plus, there is evidence that a low vitamin D could result in high blood pressure, diabetes, and multiple sclerosis. Moreover, individuals who have dark skin already have a risk of developing vitamin D deficiency because the presence of so much melanin reduces their skin's ability to make vitamin D when exposed to sunlight. Vitamin D is essential, as are all vitamins, and without it, our bodies simply do not function effectively and cell regeneration is less efficient. And again, here's the vital bit. Vitamin D is an essential vitamin for preventing infection. For most people, the most important source of vitamin D is sunshine. People who stay indoors for much of the time are deprived of vitamin D and more likely to suffer from infections. You can get some vitamin D from fortified foods, but for most people shut away indoors, the answer is probably taking a vitamin D supplement. Yeah, again, that was something that was a game changer for me during the COVID era, was learning about vitamin D and its importance. And people consider it not really, it shouldn't really be a vitamin. It should really be considered a hormone because of how important it is and the functions it has. And the fact that it leads to increased risk of infection and illness. And knowing that, we were told to stay indoors and we were punished for going outdoors and walking around and hanging out in parks, and beer gardens were closed, and that just didn't make any sense. And we had one of the most fantastic summers with clear blue skies and sunshine that we've seen for a long time. You know, they stopped spraying us in 2020, and the summer was magnificent. So ample opportunity to tell people, hey, get outside and get your vitamin D. This is really important to boost your immunity, keep you healthy in the face of this thing that's going around. But they didn't communicate that. You had to go to the back channels, you know, the alternative media, the alternative health gurus and talking heads to get that information. So another chink in the armor of their narrative. And Gary G says, it's all marketing, baby. Yeah, it is. It's all marketing. It's all words. And they spell words, and their words are spells, and they cast these spells over our minds, knowing that our minds are the driving force behind our behavior. So if they can influence our minds and plant seeds there and control the way we think and speak and the language we use, which is what television does, it downloads language patterns into your subconscious, which you then regurgitate and repeat. If they can do that, then they can control your behavior. Adam says, the fact that government isn't spamming how good vitamin D is for you is very suspicious. Frank says they stopped spraying because everyone was locked down indoors. Strange times. The more distance between, you know, that time and my life now, the more bizarre. It was like an episode of Twilight Zone that lasted 3 years. All right, voice recognition. Banks and other large companies are now inviting customers to record a phrase or two in order to identify themselves. Voice recognition is sold as a method of avoiding fraud and a way of helping customers protect themselves. This is nonsense, of course. Banks never do anything to help their customers protect privacy. For decades now, their ethos has been directed towards the opposite. The aim, of course, is to create a profile for each one of us, combining facial and voice recognition software and then connecting that to credit ratings and so on. Yeah, the voice recognition thing is a real... It's nonsense, because we all know that there's deep fake audio software out there, and you can get Will Smith to read the lyrics of an Eminem song or something, right? Or you can get dead people to read contemporary documents and scripts. So that software exists. No evidence or reasons why it wouldn't be used against us or against these to circumvent this supposed privacy and security measure that our banks and other companies and organizations are getting us to do. I noticed we got Mestopheles in the chat on YouTube saying, I loved the lockdown because the first time in years I was free of the misery of working for a pittance for tyrants and bullies. I know exactly where you're coming from there, Mephistopheles. You need a new job, though. But I mean, a lot of jobs, basically, you just summed up most jobs. You work for a pittance for tyrants and bullies. Because as I said earlier, to get higher up in this pyramidal structure, you tend to have to be more psychopathic, cutthroat, ruthless, conniving, scheming, manipulative, tactical. So the people who get to the top tend to have more of those qualities. Therefore, you end up, those who don't have those qualities don't tend to rise too high, and then we end up working for them, and they tend to be tyrants and bullies. So, and we get paid a pittance, of course, because the money's devalued through the creation of more of it, the loaning out of more of it, and it's tightly controlled. And of course, we're taxed to the hilt on absolutely everything all the time. So that also contributes to the pittance we are paid. But good to have you here, Mephistopheles. Thank you for stopping by and leaving a comment. Right, next section. War. What is it good for? Resetting the financial system and forcing through more changes to society than you could get through in times of peace. And no, those aren't the lyrics to the song. But there's actually a lot of benefit to war, just not for, the average peon in the street. But if you're a world controller and if you're of that class and that ilk, lots of benefits. Frank says, lots of latency tonight at my end on the live stream. Sorry about that. I'm getting a bit of a message saying encoding overload. Consider turning down video settings or using a faster encoding preset. Can I do that on the fly, having never done it before? Let's see. It doesn't look like I can change any of these mid-stream. It's something I might have to check out later. I am making a recording though, so if it's really choppy and bad and unwatchable, I can upload the recording or make that available to whoever wants it later. Okay, war. It's no exaggeration to say that we are at war with our own governments. Our governments want to destroy us physically, mentally, and spiritually. Their aim is to make us so weakened and so frightened that we will do everything they want. Remember, everything that has happened was meant to happen. Everything about the new normal is designed to create and exploit suspicion, to create fear, despair, and hatred. These all weaken the spirit of the people. The aim is to turn us all into victims, but victims who are responsible for our own fate. They tell us that it is our fault that the world is in a terrible state, and so we must be punished. We must have all responsibility taken from us, and others, wiser and with a broader view, will take charge of every aspect of our lives. Concepts such as dignity, trust, respect are now regarded as old-fashioned, out of date, and too reminiscent of the empire, of which we must now be ashamed, and the Victorians who must be regarded as criminals. Frank says the voice is 100%. That's good. As long as you can hear my voice, that's the important bit. There's not much going on visually with these live streams. All right, we got water. You might think that your tap water is clean, fresh, and good to drink, but you'd be wrong if you thought that. Tap water is fine for washing, but it's not good for drinking. Saying this immediately classifies me as a lunatic, but read on. First, it's probably had fluoride added to it. The authorities have been adding the stuff to drinking water since the middle of the 20th century. The claim was that it kept teeth healthy. This is nonsense. Even the WHO has said that there is no difference in tooth decay between the countries which add fluoride to drinking water and those which do not. Fluoride does, however, cause a good many long-term health problems, including cancer. Second, much drinking water is taken from rivers into which treated sewage has been deposited. Now, I am perfectly prepared to accept that the treated sewage pumped into rivers doesn't contain bits of loo paper, used tampons, and so on. They've been filtered out. But the residues of prescription drugs such as tranquilizers and antibiotics haven't been filtered out because they can't be filtered out. And there has for years been clear evidence that rivers and therefore drinking water contain female hormones from the contraceptive pill. I first wrote about this in the 1980s, and there is a summary in my book, Meat Causes Cancer, More Food for Thought. There's also evidence that contaminants of drugs usually given by injection may be found in drinking water. Yes, get yourself a Berkey gravity water filter or a distill of some kind. Is it called a distiller or a still? The one that boils the water and then the steam goes through a little thing and collects on the other side. Do something to make sure you are treating, cleaning, and improving the quality of your water because you can, and it's not too cheap to do that, and the benefits are massive. I'm just going to have a sip. Speaking of water. But the main ingredient of tea is water. In case you didn't know that. Mephistopheles says something about civil war. All right. Well, I'm not going to be taking part. But yeah, if you want to get out there. It sounds like the kind of thing that Mephistopheles would want to see happen and want to encourage. Then you can make some deals with people. What's the guy called? Mephistopheles is from it's a play? The guy who makes a deal with Mephistopheles, doesn't he? I forget what he's called. Adam says, my brother has an osmosis water filter. It's lovely. That's good. Yeah, good. Something that cleans it, filters it, purifies it is worth getting. As Amelia says, I'm cracking up. I assume that means the stream is not very good. From my side, it all looks good. So I don't know what's causing that. So apologies. I'll upload the recording that I've done on my side and you will get it flawless, pristine version. So yeah, there's nothing I can do about that at the moment. So I'll just continue. We're on wealth tax. The much mooted wealth tax to help pay for the costs incurred in 2020 and the following years will not be paid by the wealthy who will go into tax exile, but by the middle classes aiming to acquire a little bit of wealth for themselves or their children. Mephistopheles says, why do you assume I'm encouraging it? Oh, it's just because your name. You've got the name of a demon. Right? Mephistopheles, isn't he the guy who made a deal with, I can't remember, the guy's name. The play's got his name as a title, and I just can't think what it is. He sold his soul for fame and whatnot. That's the only reason. A demon would love to see people out in the streets fighting each other instead of, doing the vertical war against the actual predatory psychopathic parasites, Frank says, the female hormones. That explains why I'm singing on a high note now. And Adam says the audio is starting to crack. Well, that's quite frustrating. With the broadcast, I'll get to the end and then I'll upload my recording for people who want to go back and re-listen. Hopefully it's not too bad. So we've got weaponization of radio frequencies. The Russians and the Americans have been experimenting with energy weapons for nearly a century. In America, a program called HARP was set up in 1933 and experimented with the weaponization of radio frequencies, and this work is being continued today. Why wouldn't it be? Weather. The weather is already being controlled. Did you think it is a pleasant coincidence that big events such as the Olympic Games and royal weddings always seem to be blessed with good weather? And now that a company which includes the ubiquitous Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as investors is planning to block out the sun, we can look forward to a very peculiar weather pattern in the future. Moreover, now that we know that our governments are trying to control us and kill many of us, we can be sure that they will weaponize the weather, using heat and cold to destroy crops and using storms to damage electricity supplies. I'd love to know more like high quality, well-referenced sources on weather and weather modification and control. I don't have any good books on that, I'm afraid. Although I'm aware of a few, I just haven't bought them. Alfalfa Omega reminds us that we should add minerals to our distilled water. Yes, that's a very good point. To remineralize your distilled water. Mephistopheles says, have you got Bluetooth on? I don't think so. On my laptop? I don't think I do. I don't know why I would. I've never used it before. But, you know, sometimes Windows likes to switch these things up, doesn't it? Let's have a quick look. No, it's off. It's off on my laptop. Gary says, he who controls the weather controls the world. That's a quote from some elite, probably. Yeah, I can believe someone saying that. You know, and you look at these unprecedented wildfires over in America. There was Hawaii, and there was the Palisades. Really crazy stuff going on. And then the clip that I shared once of Jeremy Clarkson standing in front of a cloud seeding machine and talking about that and watching it pump out a cloud and then standing under the cloud as it rained down on top of him, laughing his head off like, oh, that's amazing. They just made it rain, you know. So I think there's way more control and influence over the weather than we are kind of led to believe in most cases. Asmelia says, I've got to tend chooks. I'll catch replay. Thanks, Nick. Enjoy your weekend. Cheers, Asmelia. Yeah, I know the name's A Smile a Dayful, but the first time I saw it, I read it as Asmelia. And it's stuck, and we're sticking with that now. Frank's asking, where do you get the minerals to remineralize your distilled water? Good question. You can put in a dash or half a teaspoon of high quality salt. I really like Redmond's real salt. I'll put half a teaspoon of that in, mix it up. That's one way to do it. You could get something like Shilajit, but you got to be wary about the quality and the you get where you buy it from, and you know you probably have to do a bit of research. But you can also get like little pouches of electrolytes that you can rip and pour in, and yeah. But for me, I would go for salt. You might be able to get some like Celtic sea salt. I would just put a little salt in there. But I like Redmond's real salt because it's got all sorts of different stuff in it. President Johnson said, he who controls the weather controls the world. Really? Is that a real quote? No way. That's crazy. I didn't even know that. He who controls the weather controls the world. Fantastic. All right, Daniel Webster is the next section. Quote, I fear that they may place too implicit a confidence in their public servants and fail properly to scrutinize their conduct, that in this way they may be made the dupes of designing men and become the instruments of their own undoing. Yeah, I guess he's talking about just everyday Joe and Jane's there. Too much confidence in the public servants. Yeah. I mean, we're supposed to hold the public servants' feet to the fire on all things all the time. We should be so up in their business, holding them to high standards of behavior, of transparency, of moral standards, right? But it's the other way around. They're the ones who should have no privacy. They're the ones who should have be under constant surveillance, but it's us instead. And they have all the privacy, and they don't have the surveillance, and they have the freedom to travel around and live in extra homes and get the insider scoop on what companies to invest in and when the next market crash is going to occur and all that kind of stuff, right? They get all those benefits, bonuses, because they're close to the corridors of power, and we get the shit deal of having no privacy, no opportunity, no good clean food to eat, and we're being experimented on on top of it all. Mephistopheles says, "Is it true Starmer is a felching champion?" And anyone who doesn't know what felching is going to have a rude awakening when they just don't Google image search it. That's my advice. Maybe check Urban Dictionary. What the world will look like. The proponents of the global reset, the New World Order, and so on have very definite views on how our world will change to suit their own demonic purposes. They have, not surprisingly, been reluctant to share this view with the people they intend to rule. Nevertheless, this book contains a pretty fair indication of the sort of world and life we might expect if things continue to go their way. Frank Lennon says there's a video of Lyndon Johnson saying, "He who controls the weather controls the world." What? Okay, that's a video I've never seen, so that's great. I want to grab a copy of that for sure. If you can dig that up and put that in the chat, that would be really great, Frank. If you have time, but no worries if not, I'm sure I'll be able to find it. Okay, we're on to white supremacy. Black Lives Matter demonstrators haven't noticed that their main financial and spiritual supporters and the leaders of Agenda 21 are all white men of a certain age. It perhaps hasn't occurred to the demonstrators that when the much promoted Great Reset takes place, it will be black people in Africa who will be the ones who will die in the greatest numbers. I've got quite a big section here on Wi-Fi and cell phones. Children are exposed to thousands of hours of Wi-Fi radiation when they're at school. And since most homes are fitted with Wi-Fi and a wide variety of computers, cell phones, tablets, and other electronic equipment, the Wi-Fi radiation exposure continues when they go home. As far back as 2008, schools in Switzerland, Germany, and England have begun removing Wi-Fi from schools. But although France, Belgium, Spain, Australia, Italy, and Israel have all removed or reduced Wi-Fi or cell phone use in schools, other countries, such as England, has increased. The countries which removed or reduced Wi-Fi or cell phone use did so because there are many peer-reviewed studies showing that EMFs can cause serious health problems, particularly in children. The younger the child, the greater the vulnerability. The bone marrow of a child's head absorbs 10 times more radiation than an adult's head. The Council of Europe has warned about the risk of installing routers in schools and in 2011 called for a ban on Wi-Fi and cell phones in schools. In July 2020, the Russian government recommended the banning of Wi-Fi and cell phones in elementary schools on advice from the Medical Department of Russian Academy of Sciences and the Russian National Committee on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection with the Russian Health Ministry. It had been determined that Wi-Fi can damage the DNA, cause cancer, produce developmental changes, and also result in endocrine changes and neuropsychiatric effects. The Russians have been studying electromagnetic fields for longer than anyone and have for decades been assessing their value as military weapons. In 2011, UNICEF found that Wi-Fi in schools led to an increase of 85% in central nervous system disorders and an 82% increase in blood and immune system disorders. There was also a 36% increase in epilepsy and an 11% increase in psychological problems. It's noteworthy that insurance companies won't give cover to cell phone companies for any damage caused by phones or Wi-Fi. I think that's a typo there. I think it's supposed to be caused. The WHO has confirmed that electromagnetic fields are carcinogenic, and more so for children who have developing bodies and thinner skulls. The irony is that there are no scientific evidence that global warming is real, man-made, or a serious threat to life on Earth, but governments everywhere are busy taking action as though there were. On the other hand, there is serious scientific evidence to show that EMF is dangerous to human health, but governments are doing absolutely nothing to deal with the problem. On the contrary, they are encouraging schools to fit ever more powerful Wi-Fi equipment and hospitals. School teachers are complying with zeal, boasting of installing ever more powerful equipment in their schools and drowning their pupils in electromagnetic waves. In Charleston, USA, if you remember as well, Charleston, USA is the place where King, formerly known as Prince Charles, had his first ever Business Leaders Forum meeting, right? Charlestown. Schools in Charleston, USA boasted that they had cranked up the Wi-Fi cycle so that people in houses nearby could use it. In the UK, headmasters and headmistresses have delighted in boasting that their school has better coverage than any other establishment in the neighbourhood. It's like hangmen boasting about who can hang criminals at the greater rate. And there's also a book. It's over there it's on my health shelf. My health shelf is actually over there. I'll just go and grab it. 2 seconds. Oops. Sorry if I just gave your ears a bump by knocking the microphone there. Dr. Joseph Mercola has this book, EMF'd, 5G, Wi-Fi, and cell phones, hidden harms and how to protect yourself. The references at the back of this book are pretty extensive. It's actually it's like a core of the book. So you see there's resources. Hang on, it's going to be hard to show you just how much of the book is resources. Yeah, all that bit there is resources, references, scientific studies, papers, evidence, information, what to do about it, footnotes, etc. So really well referenced book. It's almost it's about a quarter, nearly a third of the book, right? Mephistopheles says dismal connection and feed. I'm really sorry about that. It's usually not a problem. Try Odyssey or Rumble and see if you're having the same problem. You could try Entropy as well. I'm streaming to all those places. I will upload the recording that I've done here. All right, the next section is Wikipedia. I have had a Wikipedia page since Wikipedia was first introduced. It always contained inaccuracies. Apparently I'm frozen now. No, the hard drive is not full. There's 371 gigabytes. I have had a Wikipedia page since Wikipedia was introduced. It always contained inaccuracies, and it was obviously written by amateurs who didn't understand the first thing about journalism and didn't know how much about research. Several times I asked Wikipedia to take the page down, but they wouldn't. Ironically, the reason given was that I was considered to have achieved too much to be removed. Curiously, the things for which I was considered notable have been removed, but not the page. So you're telling me that you can't see me. Well, that's everything looks fine from my end. So that is, I've got one message saying encoding overloaded, but I have no idea how to fix that on the fly. So I'm going to continue, and then I'll upload the replay after. So for a couple of decades, the page sat there. Some of the stuff on it was reasonably accurate and some wasn't. After all, almost anyone can write and edit a Wikipedia entry, and some entries are put together by kids for fun. An American teenager edited apparently nearly half of the pages on the Scots Wikipedia. He started when he was 12, and it was years before anyone noticed that he'd been writing a good deal of drivel. Anyone can write and edit a Wikipedia page except a living individual who is the subject of a Wikipedia page. Crooks, rapists, pedophiles, lunatics, bigoted Ku Klux Klan members, and 12-year-olds are allowed to become Wikipedia editors. Many are deep state globalists, technocrats, transhumanists, fascists, and lying, cheating, global warming, fakery enthusiasts. Some editors mean well and are a credit to the original idea. Others are just cowardly, little weasels who hide behind silly pen names and use the site to promote their political prejudices and pet theories. Many, I fear, are probably underachievers, full of opinions but never able to persuade the real world to take notice of them. And it's perfectly possible to pay editors to improve a Wikipedia page for a nice fee. A Wikipedia editor could probably make even Tony Blair look like a saint. And then on March the 18th, 2020, I was stupid enough to make a video. Almost immediately, my Wikipedia page was changed dramatically. Within hours, there were Nazi war criminals who had better Wikipedias than I did. Everything I had ever done that could be considered remotely useful was removed, and the page was filled with an array of clever but deceitful distortions of the truth. It is official policy to insult, smear, and demonize anyone who questions the establishment line, and Wikipedia is one of the weapons. So, for example, I suddenly became a discredited person. Why? Because someone at Wikipedia decided I was. I have filing cabinets full of thousands of reviews and interviews, and no one has ever described me as discredited until Wikipedia or an editor decided I was. But when a small newspaper in Scotland quoted Wikipedia, the Wikipedia editors put the Scottish paper down as a source for their defamatory comment, a neat little vicious circle. Overnight, I became a conspiracy theorist, though I rather feel that the conspiring is being done by the people I'm criticizing. Manipulated truths and deceits used to disappear when a newspaper was turned into chip paper. Today, they last for eternity. Someone dug through decades-old internet pages and found that I had been criticized by something called the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK. What Wikipedia did not bother to mention, though they should have known, was that the ASA is a private organization and that when they received a complaint about me, I sent them 24 scientific references in support of my claim that meat causes cancer. The ASA, who had received a complaint from the meat trade, refused to look at the references and simply announced that I had been censured. The same thing is true of the Press Complaints Commission. They too refused to look at scientific references before reaching a conclusion. Other decades-old bits and pieces of nonsense were adapted, edited, and published with the sole aim of discrediting me. It seemed to me that the page contained more garbage than the average dustbin. Wikipedia says my theories have been discredited, but only by Wikipedia and a few drug company trolls. My writings about AIDS were intended to be reassuring and were all scientifically accurate. At the time I was writing, the public was being told that AIDS would kill everyone. And so it goes. It's never occurred to Wikipedia editors to ask why, if I really were, in their words, a discredited pseudo-scientist, I still have a Wikipedia page. The last time I looked, I saw that they deleted details of me, of the successful campaigns I'd run, the TV and radio series I'd made, the voluntary work I'd done with great joy, and they had deleted the list of my books, over 100 of them. They deleted the fact that I'd written columns for many leading national newspapers and dismissed me as a self-published author, slyly omitting to mention that I've had books published by dozens of leading publishers in the UK, the USA, and around the world, and translated into 25 languages. They managed to mention that I had left the People newspaper, but failed to mention that I'd resigned because the editor wouldn't print a column I'd written criticizing Britain's involvement in the Iraq War. They say I can't practice medicine, but ignore the fact that retired doctors aren't entitled to a license. A large number of references to articles which were complimentary were simply deleted, as were quotes praising my work. I'm accused of being a pseudo-scientist, and that's a libel which is used to discredit anyone who dares to question the establishment view. The aim, of course, was simply to demonize me, to dissuade people from taking any notice of my books, articles, and videos, and to dissuade other doctors from speaking out. That was the real point of it. Wikipedia has become a potent weapon in a new war of oppression and disinformation, and in its political bias is now threatening our very freedom and promoting the elite at the expense of ordinary citizens. It is as reliable and trustworthy as the BBC, which is to say not at all. I've been proved absolutely accurate since March 2020, but truth and facts don't matter in this alternative world. And I'm not the only one to have been targeted, of course. Anyone who speaks out against the new establishment gets the same treatment. They remove all the individual's real achievements and replace them with anything they can find which can be edited in such a way to discredit the person concerned. The Wikipedia site may have started out with good intentions, though the idea of allowing amateurs to write and edit an encyclopedia was always a trifle flaky and dependent on goodwill and honesty. But until recently it seemed pretty harmless and occasionally useful. So who's behind it all? Well, I know the names of some self-styled editors. Some seem weaselly or cowardly and appear to be driven by jealousies, prejudices, and bigotry. They mostly hide behind silly code names. Some are undoubtedly working for government agencies, but others are not difficult to identify. They edit with the zeal of a fanatic, libeling me behind the scenes a good deal. One claims that the 2016 election and the Brexit referendum was swung by Putin. Mixing arrogance with ignorance, he describes himself as a member of the left-wing thought police, which seems very accurate. Another editor, who manages to misspell his fake name, has published strange and revealing political mutterings on a site called Reddit. The editor also wants to remove a Wikipedia page which deals with a series of 15 books I wrote about a GP in a village in Devon. Even those who once loved Wikipedia are now embarrassed and ashamed of how it is being abused to promote prejudices and political extremism. Certainly the page that has been recreated in my name is unbalanced, destructive, and, to say the least, misleading. I have screenshots of the worst libels. Larry Sanger was co-founder of Wikipedia, and he certainly doesn't think much of what it has become in the hands of these people. In his excellent recent book, Essays on Free Knowledge, Sanger writes about the CIA and other government agencies editing pages. He excoriates Google, which he says helped establish Wikipedia's underserved popular perception of credibility, and states boldly that Wikipedia has abandoned neutrality and is used as a tool for social manipulation. Anyone who edits or uses Wikipedia should read his books to understand what has happened. Wikipedia is the modern version of the Witchfinder General. I had never heard of that book. I'm going to draw a little thing around it and put a tab to come back. And yeah, it sounds like it'd be worth reading, definitely. The co-founder of Wikipedia, writing a book about how intelligence agencies interfered with his project. Apologies as well to everyone on the live stream if the playback is no good. I have no idea how to fix it because it all looks very fine from my side. An online encyclopedia written largely by unskilled amateurs may have been a good idea when it began, but it's time it was closed down. It's an insult to journalism, history, science, medicine, and the essence of the encyclopedia. It is without doubt now doing far more harm than good. There are honest editors who are interested in maintaining Wikipedia as a resource, but they have allowed abuse on the site to be so widespread that an increasing number of people regard it as a joke. Some original thinkers now regard a defamatory Wikipedia page as a sign that they are doing something right, but it's sad that the site's management appear to tolerate the bias and prejudices of some of the editors. I wonder how many innocent victims have committed suicide as a result of these character assassinations. Most worrying of all is the news that early modelling which helped guide the British government's approach in 2020 used Wikipedia, the disreputable site, which is edited by all sorts of weirdos and freaks, as well as by people with very particular political agendas. I once heard two boys arguing in a shop. "I read it on Wikipedia," said one. "Then it's probably wrong," replied his pal. And that says it all. Wikipedia has been killed off by people with prejudices, and many sad and toxic editors are the online soldiers for the forces of fascism and disorder. Like others who have been demonized and had their professional lives ruined, I feel a sense of quiet despair, but since my reputation has now been unfairly trashed, I'm now more determined than ever to continue to expose the truth. And we're actually coming up on the final 2.5 pages. So we got a section here called Wilding. Wilding is the name given to the idea that if large areas of countryside are left unattended, they will magically and mysteriously turn into flower meadows and pleasant bluebell-filled woods. The trees will be filled with birds singing their hearts out, and below them acceptable mammals will roam what is left of the fields and pastures. Sadly, none of this will happen. In the UK, if land is allowed to go wild, it will be overgrown with brambles, Japanese knotweed, giant hogweed, and fast-breeding animals such as rats. I imagine much the same sort of thing will happen in other countries, but with local variations. But none of this troubles the wilding enthusiasts. The original official name for this nonsense was the Wildlands Project, and the idea was to give back to nature huge areas of land with corridors of land connecting them all up. There are even plans to destroy dams, even those which generate electricity, so that huge amounts of lands can be turned into lakes. Moreover, the plan was and is to release all sorts of wild animals onto the land. In the United States, for example, wolves and bears are being released. In the UK, bison are being released and 2 rangers are being recruited to look after them. It is apparently hoped that the animals, the largest land-based mammals in Europe, will disrupt the ecosystem in woodlands. I bet they will. Heaven knows what this will do to the existing wildlife. There have been no bison in the UK since the last ice age. What's it all about? Well, it isn't about letting huge areas of countryside turn into a conservation area for Japanese knotweed and huge rats. And although wilding or rewilding appears to be the suburban woke version of good husbandry and preservation of the countryside, it certainly has nothing to do with conservation or respect for either humans or wildlife. The aim of wilding, which is not at all understood by country folk and those who oppose it, is simply to force people to move into large cities where they can be more easily managed and controlled. Wind farms. How's the stream going over on Odyssey, or has everybody left because the stream's too bad now? Could be. Wind farms. We're nearly at the end, so I'm just going to push through. Wind farms are much favoured by the cultists who believe in global warming. If your aim is to kill a good many birds, then look no further than a wind turbine. They're excellent if this is what you want. They are not, however, terribly good at generating electricity. There are several problems. First, building a wind turbine and digging out all the essential materials uses up more energy than the windmill will produce in its lifetime. Second, maintaining a wind turbine requires a good deal of electricity. When there is no wind, something which happens more often than you might think, the blades have to be turned round artificially in order to stop them seizing up. And guess what's used to keep the blades turning artificially? Electricity. Third, when there is no wind, then the turbine doesn't make electricity, and the people relying on it for heat, light, cooking, and so on will freeze or starve to death. So, wind farms are really best for killing birds, though it would be more profitable to hire a bunch of hedge fund managers and get them to pay £5,000 a day to shoot the birds. So apparently, Odyssey is the same, and it's 10 minutes behind. Well, apologies again, but we'll push through, finish this next bit, and I'll wrap it up and I'll upload the recording. Okay, world government. Every major dictator in history has dreamt of a world government with themselves in charge. Alexander the Great wanted a world government, and so did Julius Caesar. Charlemagne and Napoleon wanted to control the world, and so, of course, did Hitler. Now, a world government is the target of people like Tony Blair, long discredited and widely regarded as a disreputable war criminal. And the letter Z. Zinc. Essential for a healthy immune system and can help shorten the duration of a cold and make symptoms less severe. Zinc helps your body fight infections by boosting the production of antibodies. The WHO has reported that zinc deficiency may be responsible for 13% of diseases such as pneumonia and flu in children under the age of 5. And zinc deficiency is common among the elderly, and a major reason why they are susceptible to infection. The easiest solution is regular supplements. So go out and get your zinc supplements. I think you can also eat Brazil nuts. Frank says, persevere, Nick. It's still very bad, but the last part of the book needs to go on record. Agreed. All right, so you got your distilled, remineralized water, get your zinc, and get your vitamin D from the sun wherever possible. And the way you do that is to get the sun on as much of your best as you can. And the other advantage of that is you get sun in your eyes. It sets your circadian rhythm, helps you sleep better. Turn a light on, it's getting dark here. Blair is a demon in skin suit. Or a DISS, D-I-S-S. All right, this is part 3, the final part of the book. Actually, that light hasn't made this look any better. We'll go back to the natural daylight. Part 3, rescuing our future from the past. If things go as Prince Charles, Boris Johnson, Klaus Schwab, Tony Blair, Bill Gates, and others seem to hope, then the only future we will have is the future they will let us have. So what do we do about it? How do we change our governments in order to protect ourselves? Repelling the outrageous plans of the globalists will merely provide us with a temporary respite. We have to get rid of them permanently if we are to be free of their evil plans. And that means redesigning the world so we retain dignity and respect and repel the billionaires and control freaks who have designs on the world and on humanity itself. The proponents of the global government condemn all opposition. If you don't approve of the Great Reset, you must be a racist or something equally horrendous. The monstering, the demonizing is done relentlessly, and the collaborators are constantly recruited as foot soldiers in the war. Politicians and police officers constantly encourage collaborators to shame those with hidden disabilities and health problems, as well as those with free spirits and free minds. Their aim is plainly visible. It is to dehumanize humans, to allow robots to take over the world, to deprive us all of our hearts and souls and our freedom and democracy. The aim of the Fourth Industrial Revolution is to control who we are as well as what we do and what we think. This is what they mean by the Great Reset. All babies will be programmed. Robots will take over all jobs. The world population will be reduced by 95%. The UN's stated aim is for the industrialized nations to collapse. No one, says the UN, will enter the new age unless he will take a Luciferian initiation. They want to scare us, divide us, and take away our power. They want to destroy small businesses and the middle classes and all ambition and all aspirations. They want to confiscate all private property and cause economic chaos so that they can reset the world. They want to install unelected regional governors just as the EU planned to do, and to ban all manifestations of nationalism. So, for example, national flags will be outlawed. They have got us concentrating on the means, not the end. The means of studying the leaves, not the trees, and certainly not the woods. That's an excellent. What I would say is, when you're mentioning Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab and Tony Blair and all these people, they take their orders as well. I don't think they are the masterminds and the people pushing the agendas ultimately. I think there's people behind them. Their role is to be hated, but they get wealth and influence and lucrative deals and such in return. But they're playing a role. They're playing a part. I don't think they're the masterminds. I really don't. There's an afterword here as well. Read that. Even when we have won this war, we'll have to continue fighting to protect our society and our individuality. The threat to our freedom and democracy will never disappear because the people who planned Agenda 21 and the global warming fraud upon which Agenda 21 rests will never go away and will remain determined to end democracy and all forms of freedom and to form a world government under their control. We and all future generations will have to remain eternally vigilant. It would help in the short term if all those identified as taking part in and supporting and promoting the plans for a new world order were imprisoned for life. Since they are responsible for millions of deaths, it will not be difficult to charge them under existing legislation. The evil proponents of Agenda 21 may lose this battle, but they will keep trying with a new law here, a new recommendation there, and an endless series of guilt-producing films and reports. They will never give up, and we will have to remain on guard for eternity. If we lose this war, it will be because not enough people care enough to do something. And if we do lose, then we will be nothing more than slaves in a totalitarian society that will make the USSR and China look like a benevolently run holiday. And that's that. So the final thing we want to get on the record is essential reading. And this is a book list in absolutely no particular order. He's got a bit of an explanation here about his essential reading list, though. I used thousands of books, articles, and papers in the preparation of this book. To show off and impress readers, I could have filled 100 pages with the full list of all the scientific papers I consulted. Showing off in this way seems common these days, and it's not uncommon to find a book of which a third or more consists of nothing but a huge list of references which no one will ever use and which the original author probably copied out of a reference book. Anyone over the age of 70 who hasn't acquired a little skepticism, not to mention cynicism, has probably not been paying attention. However, listing all the sources I have used would have doubled the price of the book, and I have always preferred to make my books available as cheaply as possible. I would rather sell 100 copies of a book and make 1 cent on each one than sell 1 copy of a book and make $1. But here's a list of some recommended books, most of which I read several times and referred to while writing this book. The books are listed in no particular order. I didn't put them in alphabetical order because I couldn't decide whether to do so. The list as short as I could. So we can read through some of these. I'll scan it and I'll mention the ones that stand out to me. So we got Wag the Dog, which is a novel by Larry Beinhardt, and the film is kind of an infamous film. I didn't know it was a novel, though. That's great to know. Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau. There is also Power Shift, Alvin Toffler. He also did Future Shock, didn't he? Future Shock. And The Republic by Plato, of course. Okay, we got The Hidden Persuaders, Vance Packard. I've got that one. Got a few Vance Packard books, actually. He did The Hidden Persuaders. He did The People Shapers as well. That's another one he did. So a lot of social conditioning and mind control type topics. Snakes in Suits, When Psychopaths Go to Work. And there's one here called Hidden Dangers about the EMF radiation by Captain Jerry G. Flynn. You got Patrick Wood's book, Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order. And then Arthur Furstenberg's book as well on The Invisible Rainbow, which is about electricity and its effect on the human organism. Understanding Media, Marshall McLuhan, that's a bit of a classic. Prostitutes by Udo Ulfkott, Embedded in the Pay of the CIA. Rosa Quare's book, Behind the Green Mask. Of course, Klaus Schwab's terrible book, Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And then you got G. Ed Griffin's book, Creature from Jekyll Island. Brave New World, Animal Farm, 1984, classic. Oh, the Bible as well. You got the Bible in there. What else? Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, Machiavelli. Yeah, a few history books. The Lessons of History. There's one here called Greta's Homework. That might be a good one. And you got a list of books, of his own books as well. I won't read those out because I haven't read most of them. I haven't read any of them, actually. The only other Vernon Coleman book I've read is about addiction, and that was pretty good. I was impressed by that. And we won't do the biography of the author because I think he is pretty well known at this point. And so, that brings us to the end of Vernon Coleman's book, Endgame, The Hidden Agenda 21. We made it. We got to the end. And hopefully, the recording that I'm making on my side is not suffering the same problems and issues that you're having out there on the receiving side of things. So I won't say too much or blather on for too long at the end now. We'll wrap this up. We'll get it closed down because I know it's infuriating when streams fail and the signal is not clear. But that was a great book. I'm very grateful to Vernon Coleman once again for letting us read it through in its entirety on the channel. And there's a lot that's worth going back and reading in there. I think he's on the money with a lot of the groups that he points to and the aspects of the agenda that we're living through. I'm just looking now to see if he talked about the Club of Rome because I can't remember if he left it in here or not. So I'm going through the C section. We got cell phone censorship. That was a big section, wasn't it? Chemtrails, Chrislam, Christmas. No, it doesn't. Yeah, class division, Clausewitz. He hasn't got Club of Rome in here. But that's okay because we're reading the Club of Rome, First Global Revolution, the book club. So please consider signing up and joining on those discussions. It's a lot of fun. I did a preview video here on the channel so you can check that out. Apologies once again for the technical glitches. I'm going to investigate it and hopefully stop it happening in the future. But I really like having you all here, and I've shouted out your names already. We've got Mattia, 11A, Frank, Hasdak, Adam. We have got Timmy and Tammy. In fact, we got Mephistopheles, Gary G was hanging out earlier. Asmelia, A Smiley Day was here. And I think that might be everybody. So good. Tarot Galaxy, of course. So grateful to have you all tuning in and participating and engaging in the chat as well, because I really like it when I get to respond to your comments and have a bit of a back and forth and get your feedback in real time when the broadcast is going tits up. So thank you for that feedback. I'm going to watch the replay. I'll upload a better quality recording later on, possibly tomorrow because it's getting late here. And I think I've got to go and give my son some cuddles at the moment. Take it easy, all right? Thank you for hanging in there. We've got another book under our belts, and the full playlist will be under the playlist tab on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. And next week, if all goes well, we will be beginning Between Two Ages, Zbigniew Brzezinski, the infamous book. They're always talking about it. Is this going to be as damning and revealing and crazy? And what's the word? There's a word beginning with C, but it's just disappeared from my mind. Controversial, as people make it out to be. You know, we're kind of like detectives here. We're listening to the talking heads who teach us all about the world of hidden history, and they point to these books and these thinkers and these characters, these big boys, as Alan Watt would refer to them. But maybe they're blowing things out of proportion. Maybe they're misinterpreting the points that they made. So it's good to take a look for ourselves. What did these writers actually commit to paper? Are they really all that bad, or actually are they good people who are trying to plan a prosperous and peaceful future for us and our children and our children's children? I think I know where I stand on that side. I think the answer is a strong, resolute, and clear-cut no. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to reading this one. It took me a while to get hold of a copy, and it shouldn't take us too long. We're looking at 300 pages, so it won't drag on for too long. There's no page numbers in Endgame, so I'm not quite sure how many pages that was. But next Friday, we'll be kicking off with that. Be wonderful to have you here. But until then, have a lovely where you are, and stay warm, stay hydrated, get that nice, clean, distilled, filtered water, add some minerals to it, get your vitamin D up, get out in the sunshine, maybe consider a zinc supplement as well. Keep moving, give the people close to you lots of hugs and compliments, and say nice things to them, because sometimes we don't know how much time we've got left with them and here on earth, and so why not just be good, do good things, do nice things, be friendly, be positive, make someone's day better, just for no reason other than it's a good thing to do, right? Small acts of kindness, and drop a seed here or there about the true nefarious machinations of this parasitical, psychopathic class who are pulling the strings and designing the systems, right? We can fight back with good humor, with cheer, with positivity, with optimism, with kindness, love, compassion, decency, all that good stuff that we are capable of. Embody it and make the world a better place, or at least slightly better than it was when you got here. That's the rule, isn't it? So, lovely to have you all here. Have a lovely weekend. Take care of yourselves and each other. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, God bless.